A man's eyes widen in disbelief. He collapses to his knees in a sunlit room, grappling with an impossible thought: reincarnation. As the question of his favorite game echoes in his mind, he prepares his answer, recalling the world that has now become his reality. That reality is centered around a grand academy, where on April 5th of Slayer Year 101, students gather for the entrance ceremony. Among the crowd, students exchange pleasantries and anxieties. One girl wishes another good morning, asking if she's nervous. The other admits she's terrified about the exam results. This world is that of a classic sword and magic fantasy RPG. For one man in another life, this game, Dungeon and Brave, was an escape. He reflects that no matter how many times he plays, he never tires of it, as it allows him to endure his bleak workplace. With a determined grin, he declares he is entering his 42nd playthrough. A key feature that differentiates the game from a regular RPG is the ability to deepen bonds with the heroines and become their lovers. In the world of the game, the hero, Leon Praise, is already the center of attention, blushing as a crowd of female students surrounds him. As Leon stands with other students, including the serious Nagisa Saikai, an official announcement begins, stating that the top performers of the entrance exam will now be revealed. Back in his apartment, the player leans forward in anticipation, a wide grin on his face. This is the part he's been waiting for. He stares intently at the screen, knowing that the four main people, the heroines of the story, are about to be introduced. The results appear on screen. In 5th place for the entrance exam is Shell Uranus, whose starting job is mage. Following her in 4th place is Nagisa Saikai, the swordsman. The list continues with the 3rd place performer, Aerith Centria, whose starting job is cleric. As his recollection of the game's heroines concluded, his mind settled on the central figure of the story, Leon Praise. The official class topper of the entrance exam, a descendant of heroes and the game's protagonist, whose starting job was the powerful Spellblade. He recalled that the main story was about controlling Leon, increasing intimacy with the heroines, and ultimately challenging the Demon King. In addition to the main plot, the game was filled with numerous sub-events. While most were well-known, rumors persisted among fans about undiscovered hidden events, adding a layer of mystery and depth for dedicated players. The gamer's thoughts then drifted to one of the game's most praised features, its beautiful graphics. The character outfits could even change depending on the story's progression. He mused to himself how incredibly beautiful the visuals were, which was undoubtedly a huge part of why Damburay sold so well. But the biggest reason of all, he thought with a slight, giddy blush, was the fact that you could create a harem. He quickly clarified this thought in his own mind. It wasn't about intense conquest, but rather the incredibly heart-melting process of raising intimacy with the heroines. This popularity led to massive success. The game, Damburay, was adapted into anime, manga, and other merchandise. Players were thrilled because it perfectly balanced serious RPG elements with romantic and even erotic aspects. An all-ages version was also released, with those scenes heavily cut. The memory of it all became overwhelming. He clutched his head, crying out in mock pain. Of course, he had everything, all the merchandise, as he gestured wildly towards a packed display case of character figures. The effort of recollection was too much. He slumped forward over his low table, admitting to himself that he was just too tired, a level of exhaustion he felt he'd never reached before. With a final thought, he decided to just sleep for a little while, collapsing onto a cushion on the floor and immediately drifting off. The man now, inhabiting Xenon Baskerville's body, recalls the details of the game world he has found himself in. He remembers being asked what kind of game he dislikes, and the answer flashes through his mind. He thinks of the game Dungeon Brave Soul 2. In this sequel, a character named Xenon, who is nameless in the first installment, becomes the main character. The game's story begins after the hero, Leon, has already sealed the Demon King. The premise is that the player takes on the role of this new protagonist, Xenon, but the nature of this role is deeply unsettling. In the game's narrative, Xenon approaches Leon and becomes a troublesome friend. He also befriends the heroines, and together they form an adventuring party. However, this alliance is a facade. The situation gradually shifts as the heroines begin to distance themselves from Leon, leaving him utterly alone. The reason for their abandonment becomes clear. Xenon was systematically stealing the heroines away, leaving them defeated and broken at his feet as he smirks with triumph. Xenon's cruelty reaches its peak as Leon, cornered and isolated, is forced to witness one of the heroines being violated by the villain. Watching the horrific act unfold, Leon screams in pure anguish, his voice cracking as he begs for it to stop. His pleas are ignored. A shadow of grim resolve falls over his face, tears streaming from his eyes as he reaches a hand forward in a final, desperate gesture. Driven to the absolute brink of despair, Leon unleashes the seal of the Demon King. After shattering the chains binding a great door, he walks alone into the cavernous darkness beyond. His final, desperate act of unsealing the Demon King has its inevitable consequence. The world ends in a blinding flash of light. This grim finale is precisely why the gamer, back in his own reality, despises the sequel. He recalls how the original Damburay was a heart-stirring tale of love and battle, but Damburay 2 twisted it into a dark and grotesque story. It is an experience he never wants to repeat. His thoughts dissolve into blackness, only to be replaced by a strange, new awareness. A hand reaches upward, fingers splayed, toward an unfamiliar, ornately carved ceiling. He sits up bewildered. Where is this? He wonders, taking in the opulent window and curtains. It is not his room. His confusion deepens as he looks down at his own body, finding a lean, muscular torso that does not belong to him. His eyes scan the surroundings, confirming his disbelief. He is in an undeniably luxurious room, vast and richly appointed with gilded furniture and mirrors. Driven by a desperate need for answers, he rises and walks across the plush carpet toward a large, ornate mirror. As his reflection begins to resolve in the polished glass, he stops abruptly, a sharp intake of breath catching in his throat. He stares, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The hell is this? He thinks, his mind reeling from the sight. This face. The horrifying realization dawns on him. The sharp, angular features staring back belong to the one character he despises most in the entire game series. He recognizes the face of Xenon Baskerville. The shock overwhelms him. He collapses to his knees, clutching his head as he cries out in his mind, "What's happening?" He has been reincarnated, not as the hero he admired, but as the villain he loathes in his favorite game. His future is now terrifyingly uncertain. Staring into an ornate mirror, the man recognizes the face before him. It is Xenon Baskerville, a character from the world of Dungeon Brave Soul. The horrifying realization crashes down. He has been reincarnated as the one person he despised most in that world, the antagonist of the game's sequel. His mind flashes back to his previous life, an ordinary existence where his greatest concern was getting a little sleep after a long gaming session. He rubs his eyes in disbelief, questioning the cruel twist of fate that forced him into the body of this specific man. He recalls Xenon's in-game reputation, wondering what kind of evil deeds one must commit in a past life to be reincarnated as a man infamous for preying on women. The despair deepens as he thinks that if reincarnation was inevitable, he would have infinitely preferred to become the story's hero, Leon, surrounded by his companions. A cry of pure anguish echoes in the darkness of his thoughts. His brooding is shattered by a knock at the door. A maid enters, apologizing as she does. Startled from his thoughts, he turns abruptly and demands to know who it is. She continues to apologize profusely for her rudeness and for entering without permission. She explains that normally he doesn't wake up even when she knocks, so she let herself in. Bowing her head, she states her readiness to accept punishment. The word punishment sends a jolt of pure shock through him. He stares, completely bewildered by her expectation. The maid then turns her back, presenting herself as if for a beating. She tells him she is prepared and to punish her as he usually does. The horrifying implication dawns on him. The original Xenon was a violent man who regularly abused his servants. He internally curses the man he's become, fighting the urge to shout so as not to arouse suspicion. He coldly tells the maid he won't punish her and orders her to put on her clothes. He warns her not to make him repeat himself, thinking that the real Xenon would have struck her 10 times by now. The maid, addressing him as Xenon Sama, quickly agrees. After a moment, the maid thanks him for waiting. He holds up a dark garment, confirming to himself that the clothes are primarily black. They are, without a doubt, the clothes of Xenon. He observes the maid, a new appreciation for her appearance dawning on him as he notes her beauty. Pushing the thought aside, he considers his next move and asks her for the current year, month, and day. The maid replies thoughtfully that it is April 5th in the year 101 of the Slayer calendar. The specific calendar name confirms his suspicion. He is definitively in the world of Damburay. He immediately recalls the significance of this date. April 5th is the day of the entrance ceremony for the Royal Academy of Sword and Magic in the capital, an unforgettable event for him as a player who had completed the game. His reverie is interrupted when the maid asks if he will be skipping his morning training. Surprised by the question, he decides on the spot that he will begin attending the academy starting today. She explains that she only asked because he trains every single morning without fail. The revelation stuns him. The original Xenon was a diligent hard worker, a trait completely absent from the game's depiction of the character. Seeing his hesitation, the maid offers to prepare breakfast if he's taking a break. He quickly corrects her, stating he will train as usual and asks her to lead him to the training grounds. She leads him to a desolate, ruined courtyard. He stares in disbelief at the rubble and weathered structures, asking what this place is. The maid confirms that this is, in fact, his training ground. He picks up a sword, its weight feeling strangely familiar in his hand. A sensation washes over him, as if he's been using this body since birth, and he realizes he is gradually becoming accustomed to being Xenon. His gaze falls upon a row of heavily damaged training targets. He may not be an expert, but he understands that such proficiency requires more than just talent. A dark, swirling energy gathers in his hand as he instinctively calls forth a spell. Dark Blade. The vortex of dark magic erupts from his palm, striking a training dummy and obliterating it in a violent explosion of splintered wood and shadow. He stood, contemplating the paradox of his new identity. The original Xenon was a diligent man who mastered both swordsmanship and advanced dark magic. So how did he become known as a villain who preys on women? While the reason remained a mystery, he knew that as long as he inhabited this body, he had to understand the man he once was. This line of thought led him to a sudden realization. He remembered that the current date was the day of the Academy's entrance ceremony. The events of the game had not yet begun, meaning the original Xenon hadn't committed the villainous acts he was famous for. There was no reason for anyone to dislike him yet. With this understanding, a wave of excitement washed over him. He clenched his fists, realizing he could avoid the romantic developments of the story, lead a relaxed school life, and perhaps even support the protagonist, Leon, to avoid danger. His triumphant thoughts were interrupted by his maid offering him a bowl of water. Surprised, he thanked her, admitting it was a big help. His simple words of gratitude, however, had an unexpectedly powerful effect. The maid froze solid, a look of utter disbelief on her face. As he dried his hair, he asked why she had turned to stone. Internally, the maid, Leviana, couldn't believe that Xenon-sama was thanking her. She questioned just how terrible a person the original Xenon must have been for such a small kindness to be so shocking. Seeing her stunned reaction, he decided to press his new, kinder approach. He looked at her directly and confessed that he had always been grateful for her devotion, but had been too shy to say so until now. Leviana, blushing deeply, could only manage a small, questioning sound in response. His words broke through her shock, replaced by overwhelming joy. With hands clasped to her mouth, Leviana declared she was happy for his support and would appreciate him from now on. As she spoke, Xenon reaffirmed his decision internally. He could not become a villain. It was better to act as if he'd had a change of heart now, while he still could, before he slipped up. Her emotional outburst intensified, catching him off guard. Leviana wept with pure happiness, exclaiming that this was the best day of her life and that her devotion had finally been rewarded. A flustered Xenon tried to calm her, insisting she was exaggerating and that the fault was his for not thanking her sooner. He promised to rely on her from now on, and through her tears, she readily agreed. Moments later, dressed for the academy in his formal uniform, he prepared to depart. Xenon stepped toward an ornate carriage, its door emblazoned with a serpentine crest. Leviana, her composure somewhat regained, tearfully urged her young master to take care. As he boarded, he reflected that changing her perception of him had been surprisingly easy. As the carriage door closed, her concern erupted into a loud cry. She shouted after him, pleading for him to return safely and without any injuries. Beside her, a butler watched on stoically. From within the carriage, Xenon muttered for her to just go already. Once underway, alone with his thoughts, the weight of his situation returned. He let out a soft sigh, the brief moment of domestic peace now behind him. The real challenge was about to begin, and he pondered just how closely he should adhere to the game's original scenario. As he traveled, he reviewed the core plot of the world he now inhabited. The story, known as Dembere, was set to begin with the Academy's entrance ceremony. Within this narrative, the protagonist, Leon Brave, was destined to spend 2 years alongside the heroines on a quest to defeat the Demon King. He continued his internal monologue, focusing on the romantic subplots. He resolved that the heroine would not be cheated on, and he certainly wouldn't be the one to steal another man's girlfriend. He had a preference for pure, unadulterated love. This resolution, however, raised a critical question. As a mere classmate, to what extent could he even influence the main scenario? He recalled the grim finale of the game's sequel, Dembere 2. In that timeline, the hero Leon successfully seals the Demon King, only for the villain Xenon to steal the heroine. This act of villainy drives the despairing hero to resurrect the Demon King himself. The consequence of that resurrection was catastrophic. Large-scale magic, unleashed by the newly returned Demon King, obliterated the royal capital, wiping out everyone in a definitive bad ending. Contemplating this horrifying outcome, he considered a path of non-interference. He could simply ignore the game scenario and wait for Leon to defeat the Demon King on his own. He reasoned that if the catalyst for the bad end was Xenon stealing the women, then the solution was simple. He just had to refrain from doing so. With his course of action decided, a look of steely determination settled on his face. He would not follow the villainous path laid out for Xenon Baskerville. He had chosen a different route, one that diverged completely from the game's original script. Before the grand, ornate gates of the Royal Academy of Sword and Magic, a group of new students, including Xenon Baskerville and Leon Praise's party, paused to take in the magnificent sight. Xenon clenches his fist, trembling with excitement. He has finally arrived at the academy, the setting of the game. A confident, eager smile spreads across his face as he resolves to begin. From their vantage point, the sheer scale of the academy is breathtaking. A sprawling courtyard bustles with countless students, a sea of new faces milling about before the majestic main building. As he walks through the familiar school grounds, a place he has traversed countless times in the game, Xenon internally scoffs at the idea of being nervous, thinking how pathetic it would be for someone like him. A sudden sharp sound makes him flinch with a yelp. He quickly covers his face, taking a moment to compose himself, noting with some relief that the jolt of surprise has drained his manic energy and calmed him down. His mind then races ahead, recalling the game's plot. He chuckles about the upcoming entrance ceremony, where Leon is supposed to get closer to the heroines. This villainous laugh terrifies the nearby girls, and he snaps out of his thoughts, frantically trying to reassure them that they don't need to be scared. His attempt to be reassuring backfires spectacularly. His face contorts into a terrifying, wide-eyed grin with bared fangs, which only frightens the students near him even more. The two girls, Aerith and Shell, recover from their shock, concluding that the fault was entirely his. As he walks away from the group, Xenon accepts this, resolving to try not to laugh in front of people from now on. Inside the vast, tiered auditorium, he finds himself sitting completely alone. He tries to rationalize his isolation, reminding himself that as the villain character, Xenon Baskerville, he isn't lonely even when by himself. His solitary brooding is interrupted by an announcement from the stage. An official-looking man with a monocle declares that it is time to announce the top students of the entrance exam. Xenon looks up, his attention captured. He watched from his seat as the headmaster began announcing the top students. The fifth-place rank went to Shell Uranus, who stood and acknowledged the honor with a simple, confident yes. As he looked at her, his knowledge from the game surfaced. She was the daughter of a frontier noble and the main character Leon's childhood friend. In fact, it was Shell who had encouraged Leon to enroll at the academy in the first place. Her starting role was Mage, a rearguard fighter specializing in offensive magic. The announcements continued, with fourth place going to Nagisa Saikai. She reacted with a sharp, determined pump of her fist. He remembered her as the lively, curious, and energetic character of the group. He knew her story well. Hailing from an eastern country with a culture reminiscent of Japan, she was a samurai girl and the daughter of a swordsmanship dojo master. Her initial job was swordsman, wielding a katana with speed that surpassed even Leon's. A crucial part of her story was the darkness she carried in her heart, a conflict central to her path. Next, third place was awarded to Aerith Centria. He recalled her game profile, born to central nobility, her father a cardinal, and possessing a famously well-proportioned figure. Her starting job was cleric, a role connected to her parents' management of the church. He mused on Aerith's original fate, a pitiful victim destined to be broken in body and spirit by the villain Xenon. A future, he thought with a smirk, that was no longer possible. His thoughts were cut short as the headmaster's voice boomed, announcing the academy's runner-up, Xenon Baskerville. The reality of being surrounded by the game's heroines suddenly overwhelmed him. They were all so cute. He felt an urge to get involved, but had no idea what to do, letting out a small, flustered laugh to himself. His quiet reverie was shattered by the headmaster's sharp, repeated call from the stage. Xenon Baskerville. The shout snapped him back to attention. He looked up to see every single student in the auditorium staring directly at him. With an internal groan, he realized he had completely missed his cue to stand up. The silence was immediately filled with hushed whispers about the evil Baskerville family and their rumored crimes. A wave of panic washed over Xenon. He had drawn exactly the kind of attention he wanted to avoid. The headmaster, misinterpreting his hesitation as arrogance, addressed him directly, acknowledging his ambition but sternly reminding him that in this meritocratic academy, disrespectful behavior would not be tolerated from anyone. He remained frozen in his seat, a silent scream echoing in his mind. He had missed the perfect moment to stand up. As panic threatened to consume him, a desperate idea took hold. Standing up now would just look pathetic, an invitation for ridicule. With a flicker of resolve, he adopted a villainous smirk. He would lean into their perception of him. All right, he declared, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I apologize for the rudeness. I shall keep your advice in mind. He paused, then added with chilling finality, but I will deliberately not stand up. His declaration was met with a profound, unnerving silence that filled the grand hall. From the stage, the headmaster stared down, equally quiet. Xenon felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple, wondering what was happening. His gaze swept across the sea of faces and landed on two of the game's heroines, who were watching him intently. The realization struck him with a fresh wave of horror. They were witnessing this entire disaster. On the stage, the headmaster's hand tightened into a fist on a lectern. Though he privately acknowledged that the boy had, in fact, apologized, the cheeky tone was undeniable. I see. The headmaster's voice boomed, cutting through the silence. So you have no intention of changing your rebellious attitude, do you? The direct accusation sent him spiraling back into panic. Internally, he shrieked in protest. He had apologized. He might look like a villain, but he was actually a good person. The headmaster let out a small cough, seemingly deciding to move on. All right, he announced. Since today is a celebratory occasion, this is as far as we'll go. He fixed his gaze on Xenon. Moreover, if no improvement is seen in the future, I cannot say what will happen. The veiled threat left Xenon stunned. He slumped, reeling from the warning. What had he done? It was all because he was too slow to stand up. As his mind raced, a new voice cut through the tension. Now for the top achiever. First place in the entrance exam, class president. Leon Brave. The name belonged to the game's one and only protagonist, Leon Brave. Born a commoner, he was the child of a hero, destined to wield the power to seal the Demon King. A handsome, blonde-haired boy beloved by many heroines, his excellent grades had earned him the top spot in his class. His starting job was Rune Knight, a rare class that blended close-range combat with magic. Xenon's blood ran cold. The protagonist he had controlled countless times was standing right there in the flesh, and he seemed to be glaring directly at him. Xenon frantically searched his memory. He hadn't stolen any heroines or done anything to earn the hero's ire yet. Across the aisle, Leon's gaze remained fixed, his expression hard and unreadable. He watched as Leon Praise was asked to give the greeting as the representative of the new students, to which Leon simply replied, yes. He began his address to the assembly, his tone humble. Leon explained that as a commoner from the countryside, he ordinarily wouldn't be standing there. He expressed his gratitude to the faculty, his seniors, and especially to his teacher, his guardians, and Count Uranus, who were like parents to him. He concluded by stating he was truly honored to be at the prestigious Royal Sword and Magic Academy. Meanwhile, Xenon wondered if his own disruptive attitude had bothered Leon, though he hadn't meant for it to. His speech continued, shifting focus. Leon stated that while the Slayer's kingdom is a peaceful country, that doesn't mean there is no evil to be hated. He declared that his reason for entering the academy was to become stronger and protect the country. Raising a fist, he proclaimed his intent to fight against the evil that causes people to suffer. Xenon, however, found the speech to be a letdown, having expected something more grandiose like a vow to become the Hero King. Leon's voice then rang out with a pointed declaration. He would fight that evil, even if it took the form of a classmate attending the very same school. This direct threat sent murmurs rippling through the assembled students. Xenon, however, was simply left baffled by the statement. His confusion turned to shock as he realized Leon's sharp, hostile gaze was locked directly onto him. An unexpected targeting. Xenon was completely bewildered, internally questioning why Leon was showing him such hostility when he had done nothing at all. Xenon contemplates the game's mechanics, recalling that in its second installment, the protagonist suddenly became the villain, complete with a new backstory. This leads him to a troubling thought. Perhaps Leon has already started directing hostility towards him, even though he has done nothing yet. He decides to try and form a thesis on this unsettling development. He continues this line of reasoning, realizing that if that's the case, Leon might be defeated by the Demon King, which could lead to the world's destruction. There is no longer a guarantee that the hero will triumph as planned and bring about a happy ending. His thoughts are cut short as an instructor announces the conclusion of the entrance ceremony, directing all students to move to their classrooms. Xenon remains seated, arms crossed, his expression unreadable as the other students begin to file out. He reflects on his precarious situation. If the game scenario has truly changed, his foreknowledge may be useless. To survive, he concludes he must make every effort to lead a peaceful school life by not disturbing Leon. He must avoid any careless actions that could hinder the hero. Despite his resolution, he feels a hostile glare from across the room. Leon is staring at him, teeth gritted in anger. Xenon, looking exhausted, can only think that it's as if he's being blamed for something he didn't do, and wonders if there's a more reliable method for his survival. A potential path flashes through his mind. Join Leon and the others to support the defeat of the Demon King. After all, Xenon is the strongest character after the Demon King and Leon himself. By helping them, he could ensure a safe school life and prevent the world from perishing. However, he immediately rejects this idea, vowing to never let that happen. He understands that trying to be a wholesome Xenon while staying true to the original game scenario will be tough. Unseen by him, a female teacher with glasses observes, questioning why Xenon is acting in such a peculiar way. As the school day ends, students are dismissed to observe club activities. Leon's group discusses having a meeting. Xenon walks past them, dismissing their chatter. He muses that first impressions determine everything, and as a member of the tyrannical Marquis Baskerville family, his reputation is already sealed. Leon glances at him one last time as he departs. Deciding to hurry home and plan his next move, Xenon arrives at a grand, imposing mansion. A horse-drawn carriage is parked outside. As he steps through the large double doors, a voice calls out, welcoming him back as young Master Xenon. Startled, he turns to see his maid, Leviena, who appeared without a sound. He asks when she got there and if she isn't cold. Blushing, she insists she is fine. Her expression then turns serious as she delivers an urgent message. His lord is waiting for him, and he must come to the office immediately. He stands before the imposing door, his expression hardening as he mentally prepares to face the man on the other side, Grandolph Baskerville. From within, a servant's voice inquires if it is the young master. As he waits, his mind floods with the game's lore about his father. Grandolph is the ruler of the kingdom's underworld, a master of assassins, a crime boss, and a slaver. He is the very individual who set the original Xenon on his villainous path, an unparalleled figure of evil. He resigns himself to the inevitable, realizing there is no avoiding his father. With a soft knock, he announces his presence. A voice from within bids him to enter, and he steps across the threshold into the vast office. The moment he is inside, dark magic erupts from the floor. A vortex of shadowy energy materializes, forming thick, menacing links of a spell identified as Bloody Chain. The chains violently seize him, slamming him face down onto the polished floor. He comes to a halt at the feet of a pair of formal, heavy boots. Pain jolts through him as he struggles against the magical bonds, looking up to see a towering, silhouetted figure. The man, his father, speaks with chilling casualness. "It's been a while, my son." The imposing man, Grandolph Baskerville, explains that the bloody chain is a dark magic designed for pure torture, continuously dealing damage. With his foot pressing down on his restrained son, he coldly states that he heard Zenon only place second in the entrance exam. His voice rises to a roar as he expresses his disappointment, questioning if Zenon is truly his heir. He bellows that the Baskerville family dominates the night and must be the strongest, declaring that Zenon has sullied their pride and that he will not allow any defeat. Looming over his son, Grandolph calls him pathetic and disappointing. He delivers an ultimatum. If Zenon fails to take the top position in the next exam, the consequences will be far worse. Announcing he will be away for work, he instructs Zenon to obey the steward and continue his training. After Grandolph leaves, the household staff rushes in. Levienna cries out Zenon's name in alarm, urging him to hold on as she prepares to administer treatment. Behind her, the butler moves to begin dispelling the painful magic. He lay in bed as Levienna carefully administered a healing potion. As the liquid touched his lips, he could feel the damage to his body beginning to disappear. Outside, the Grand Baskerville mansion stood silent under the night sky. Having tended to him, the exhausted maid had fallen asleep at his bedside. He watched her, a soft expression on his face. His brief moment of peace shattered as the memory of his father's torture resurfaced, a pain that hurt with every recollection. He couldn't comprehend how someone could be so cruel to their own son. His thoughts then shifted to Levienna, wondering why a good person like her would serve such trash, a depraved bastard known for stealing the lovers of others. The question hung in his mind until a horrifying clarity struck him. He finally understood. The reason the original Zenon went crazy, the reason he went off the path, it was because of that man. Undoubtedly, it was Grandolph Baskerville. He recalled the game's lore. The daily abuse Zenon received had caused his burdens to accumulate until he finally lost his mental balance. This breakdown led to the brutal act of framing the hero, Leon, and taking the heroines for himself. The contrast between the two was stark. Leon possessed everything Zenon did not. He defeated the Demon King, became a hero, and was celebrated by all. Born of a hero's bloodline and liked by the heroines, he was the center of attention. Zenon, on the other hand, was born into a cursed family, despised by other students, and abused without a father's love. For Zenon, Leon was a maddeningly envious presence, possessing everything he desperately craved, which must have fueled an intense jealousy and hatred. That envy culminated in one defining act. The original Zenon had betrayed Leon, stealing all the heroines away from him. But now, armed with this knowledge, he clenched his fist with newfound resolve. He had decided. He had set a goal for himself in this world. His path became clear. Before the Demon King, before any other foe, there was another person who had to be defeated first. A vicious grin spread across his face as he named his target. It was a solid goal, to defeat Grandolph. That man was an irreconcilable enemy who should not be allowed to exist. He resolved that, having been reborn, he would live freely and enjoy this world. To do so, he would deny the predetermined script of the story and defy the will of his tyrannical father. His moment of quiet determination was shattered when his personal maid, Levienna, burst into the room. Calling his name in a panic, she tripped over her own feet and tumbled forward. She landed directly on top of him, her face buried against his chest. Zenon's face flushed, completely flustered by the sudden and unexpected closeness as Levienna let out a muffled sound of surprise. A moment later, the reality of the situation dawned on her, and a mortified shriek of "Young master" echoed from the bedroom, piercing the quiet of the Grand Baskerville estate. After the commotion subsided, Zenon, now fully dressed, sat at his desk. He focused intently on his new task, dipping a pen into an inkwell to begin writing. The first thing he did was confirm his knowledge of the game, meticulously documenting quests, locations, and other crucial data from his previous life. He considered what would happen in the scenario going forward and how to obtain what he needed. To ensure his plans remained secret, he decided to write everything in Japanese, a language no one in this world could understand. Standing up from the desk, he looked over his completed notes, satisfied that this first step was complete. Now, he had to figure out how to live in this world. However, one thought eclipsed all others. In order to achieve his freedom, the one person he absolutely must defeat was that man, his father. He considered leaving the house, but quickly realized it was impossible. His father would undoubtedly send assassins after him. Moreover, if he deviated completely from the scenario, he would no longer be able to predict the actions of the hero, Leon. He was trapped, with no obvious escape. He considered the grander scope of the world's fate. While would be ideal if the hero, Leon, successfully sealed the Demon King as the original story dictated? A grim possibility loomed. His expression tightens as he visualizes the catastrophic alternative. If Leon were to fail, the entire world would be annihilated, reduced to rubble and dust. Lying in bed, Xenon Baskerville contemplates his new reality. To get stronger, he realizes he must acquire and develop skills. He whispers a single command into the quiet room. Status. In response, a shimmering, holographic screen materializes before him, illuminating the darkness. It displays his name, Xenon Baskerville, and his designated job, Magic Swordsman. He studies the display, a thoughtful hand resting on his chin. His job is the same as it was in the game, a magic swordsman, just like the hero Leon. He notes a critical difference in this world, which he knows as Dambaray. There are no character levels. Instead, strength is gained by increasing the proficiency of one's skills. His eyes drift down the list of skills. Swordsmanship at 20, dark magic at 20, and training also at 20. A flicker of confusion crosses his face as he processes the unexpected third entry. He continues to ponder the numbers. He understands why swordsmanship and dark magic would have the same value, but the proficiency increase in training is a mystery. He silently hopes there won't be any opportunities to use whatever that skill entails. His finger reaches out and touches the ethereal screen, causing it to ripple. He confirms that this is fundamentally different from the game's interface. There are no commands for items, settings, save, or load. This is his unchangeable reality. The realization solidifies his resolve. To become stronger, he must not only learn new skills and increase his proficiency, but also acquire items. He notes that the maximum value for combat skills is still far off, leaving plenty of room for growth. Furthermore, he recalls that raising certain skills to a high enough level will unlock the path to more advanced classes. The list of items he needs to secure is long. His mind races through the possibilities. Strong weapons and armor can increase his base ability values. Specific items can grant him access to new skills and magic. There are also accessories and damage-reducing talismans to consider. The number of things he must obtain is staggering. He then considers the methods of acquisition. Items can be purchased from stores, earned as rewards for completing events, or found by exploring dungeons. As he rises from the bed, pulling a sheet around himself, he faces the harsh truth of his situation. Items found in dungeons are subject to chance, making them an unreliable source. The truly rare and powerful items can only be bought at auctions, which require an immense amount of funds. He stood by the window, contemplating his strategy. He had no intention of following the game's original scenario, but he knew he must avoid getting in the hero Leon's way. It would be disastrous if he foolishly took an event item, causing Leon to lose against the Demon King. For him, that would be game over. As he pondered his delicate position, a polite knock echoed through the grand, ornate bedroom. A voice from the hallway asked, "May I come in, young Master Xenon?" The person at the door was his maid, Leviana, who entered with a breakfast tray. She explained that she thought he might be feeling unwell and had brought him something to eat. Xenon, who was indeed getting hungry, felt a sense of relief. He then noticed the food's properties. The sandwich and soup restored health, while the coffee healed status ailments. He recognized this as the support effect from Leviana's inherent abilities. He thanked her, remarking that it looked delicious. Flustered, Leviana blushed and insisted she had done nothing to deserve such thanks, as she was only doing her job. Still, Xenon looked at her with a gentle expression and repeated his gratitude, thanking her as always. His simple words of appreciation were too much for the devoted maid. As Xenon calmly sipped his coffee, Leviana became completely overwhelmed, covering her face as her nose began to bleed from sheer excitement. She scrambled backward in a panic, apologizing profusely. She promised to return for the plates later and fled the room, leaving Xenon staring in bewilderment at a small splatter of blood on the floor. He sat back down, still processing what had just happened. The intensity of the maid's adoration for the original Xenon was frightening. He couldn't believe she got a nosebleed just from being thanked. And yet, a part of him found this extreme devotion rather wonderful. Sometime later, a man in a butler's uniform entered, greeting him formally. Xenon realized that the original villain of the story had his own proper allies. There was no need to obsess over stealing party members from a hero. The butler, whom Xenon recognized as Zeus, the head of the household staff, explained his visit. He had been concerned because Xenon had missed his morning practice in the garden and wondered if he was unwell. Xenon coolly asked if Zeus intended to report his slacking off to his father. Zeus stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at him. He stated that Xenon's Lord Father has high expectations, hoping his son will grow into a strong individual worthy of the Baskerville family. The butler concluded with a heavy sentiment, expressing his sincere hope that Xenon would not betray those expectations. He stood before the head butler, Zeus, assuring him that while he might take breaks from training, he would still meet his father's expectations. Zeus bowed his head in silent acknowledgement, while Xenon let out a frustrated grunt, his patience wearing thin. Turning to leave, he announced his departure. Zeus inquired if he had any specific plans for getting stronger. With a confident smirk, Xenon declared that simply practicing swings was not the only path to power, and that he intended to surprise his father in his own unique way. A week passed. At the academy, Xenon's mere presence exuded a menacing aura, causing other students to whisper about him. He found his new school life simple. The middle school level curriculum was no challenge, and the use of magic felt innate. His gaze fell upon Leon Praise, noting that the hero's descendants still regarded him with pure hostility. Inside a lecture hall, the teacher announced the day's lesson, Dungeon Exploration. A thrill went through Zenon. This was the class he had been eagerly anticipating. His dark excitement, however, only seemed to frighten the students sitting nearby. The teacher instructed the class to form parties before heading out. She explained that dungeons are layers of monsters that exist in countless numbers across the world. While they are mountains of treasure that produce resources infinitely, they are also ticking time bombs that will endlessly spew out monsters if left unattended. The very academy they attended was established for this purpose, to exterminate the monsters that inhabit the dungeons. Its ultimate goal is to develop human resources capable of protecting the lives of the people. Gathered before a large, ornate door set into a cliffside, the teacher announced that each party would now enter the dungeon in turn. This was the Sage's Playground, the Academy's own tutorial dungeon. The teacher hesitantly pointed out that not being in a party was an issue. But Zenon, standing with defiant confidence, declared that he didn't need anyone else. He was perfectly fine on his own for a mere tutorial dungeon. His statement caused a stir among the other students. As he stood apart from the others, a voice came from behind him. It was Nagisa Saikai, who stated coolly that she had no problems either, implying she also intended to proceed alone. Zenon glanced back, a flicker of surprise on his face. Nagisa stood firm, her solitary nature clear. It was known she was initially distrustful and preferred not to interact with others. Seeing the two of them, Shell Uranus stepped forward, voicing her concern. She warned that exploring solo is dangerous, especially on a first run, and then asked if the two of them would be okay, teaming up together. She stand beside Zenon, her expression unyielding. In response to the unspoken question of them teaming up, he casually states that it's fine, but she firmly corrects him, declaring it unnecessary. Her resolve is rooted in a private strategy. She wants to keep her contact with the main heroine, Nagisa, to an absolute minimum, so as not to disturb Leon. As the students gather, the teacher, looking flustered, issues a final disclaimer. She warns them that in the unlikely event of their death, the Academy will take no responsibility, so they must not act recklessly. With a sigh, she clarifies that while there are no particularly dangerous monsters, anything that happens inside is their own responsibility. She then adds that their performance will be reflected in their grades, a statement that sends a wave of boisterous cheers through the assembled students. The excitement immediately curdles into a chaotic argument over who will enter the dungeon first. Watching from aside, Zenon sweats, thinking to himself how eager everyone is and that the teacher should just decide the order. He is pulled from his thoughts by Nagisa's voice. She observes that their classmates are acting with a reckless carelessness, as if they were on a simple outing. She then turns to him directly, asking what business he has. She bluntly notes that he looks like trouble just from his face, which is why everyone is scared of him, and then remarks with surprise that he's the first classmate to ever speak to her. Decisively, she declares that if no one can agree on an order, then she, Nagisa Saikai, will take the lead. Ignoring the shouts of protest that her move is unfair, Nagisa strides toward the dungeon entrance. She glances back at Zenon, telling him she'll leave it to him. He watches her go with a slight smirk, thinking to himself that she has a surprisingly good personality. She vanishes into the gaping maw of the dungeon, becoming a lone, distant figure in the long, dark stone passageway. Back at the entrance, the students' continued complaints about selfishness and unfairness finally cause Zenon's patience to snap. He erupts, roaring at them for wasting time with their indecisiveness and demanding they just pick a method, rock, paper, scissors, a lottery, anything because the sun is going down. His outburst having finally spurred the other students into action, they begin to depart into the dungeon. Leon Praise cheerfully announces his group is next, waving goodbye. Watching them go, the female teacher remarks to Zenon that she was surprised, noting that he seems to have leadership skills and that she has a newfound respect for him. She continues her reflection, admitting that the other students likely keep their distance from Zenon due to his appearance and family background. With a pang of guilt, she realizes she had been the same and, as a teacher, feels she must reflect deeply on this prejudice. Zenon interrupts her thoughts, his expression serious. He wants to confirm one thing regarding the order they've established. He asks her directly why she chose to be last, pointing out that she didn't even participate in the game of rock, paper, scissors with the students. He dismisses any need for her to reconsider her views on him, stating flatly that she doesn't know anything about him. His attention then shifts to the dungeon itself, and he abruptly changes the subject, asking if items and treasures acquired within are subject to attacks. The teacher explains that since this is merely part of a lesson and the dungeon is under the school's management, no taxes will be imposed. However, she adds that the items obtainable here are worth only a pittance. Hearing this, a sly grin spreads across Zenon's face as he expresses his relief, vowing to do his best to search for items. Turning to leave, Zenon formally accepts her concern. He internally muses that she is a reliable and good teacher, despite being disliked. This thought triggers a memory from the game, a vision of her being disciplined in a basement. The horrifying recollection solidifies his resolve, and he clenches his fist, swearing to himself that he will never let the world of Danbare 2 come to pass. With this new purpose, he stands before the gaping maw of the dungeon, a confident smirk on his face. He declares his intent to conquer it and steps into the darkness, ready for whatever awaits. Inside a stone dungeon, Xenon Baskerville unleashes a dark power. He calls out the name of his skill, Shadow Edge, sending a volley of shadowy projectiles ricocheting off the floor and walls, striking multiple slime-like creatures. The attack sweeps through the long, tiled corridor, leaving behind only the dissolving remains of the defeated monsters. Far in the distance, Xenon stands alone amidst the aftermath. He bends down and picks up a crystalline object dropped by one of the creatures, a slime core. Examining it with a sharp, analytical gaze, he confirms his suspicion. The dungeon structure and the items dropped by monsters are exactly as they were in the game he knows. His theory solidifies. This place is a tutorial area, populated only by simple mobs with no traps to worry about. That's why, he concludes, it's so easy to clear it solo. A few harmless wisps of light flicker in the air around his feet. Elsewhere, in another part of the dungeon, Leon Praise moves with a burst of power, his own attack slicing through the air with brilliant force. Meanwhile, Xenon continues his advance, dismissing the current foes as mere light work. With a casual wave of his hand, he dispels the lingering wisps. His focus is already on the true challenge, the formidable monster that guards the bottom floor. Back with Leon, he finds himself surrounded by a horde of slimes. With a confident smirk, he scoffs at their numbers, declaring that such small fries are still just small fries, no matter how many there are. He leaps into their midst, utterly unfazed. To him, these creatures are nothing more than punching bags, an opportunity to demonstrate his strength. A soft, amused chuckle escapes him as he continues his effortless assault, the slimes bursting into nothingness all around him. Having cleared the floor, he stands at the top of a wide staircase leading deeper into the dungeon. A final wisp of energy from a vanquished foe dissipates as he decides it's time to proceed to the next one. He finds himself on the ground, injured. Aerith Centria leans over him, her voice filled with concern as she asks if he is hurt. He grimaces, calling himself pathetic for struggling against such weak foes in his first dungeon, resigning himself to his inexperience. Meanwhile, descending to the third floor, Xenon Baskerville observes the scene from a distance. He notes that, as expected on this level, the number of casualties is increasing. He also recalls that in the original story, only Leon, Shell, and Nagisa managed to reach the final layer. His gaze settles on the resting students. He internally scoffs at the idea of an entire class possessing a cheat skill and thinks that teaming up with less capable individuals only drags one down. Below, Aerith tells the injured to line up properly so she can heal them. As she begins her work, a soothing light emanates from her hands. The other students express their gratitude, marveling at her healing magic. They praise her as Cantry, the sage, noting that her mana seems to never run out, no matter how many people she heals. Watching her selfless act, Xenon is visibly taken aback. An expression of stunned surprise crosses his face as he stares at the cleric. He sharply slaps his own cheek, forcing himself to look away. The realization hits him. That's the kind of display he would fall for. If he stared any longer, he might genuinely be captivated, which would lead to a bad ending for the Demon King's resurrection. Shaking off the thought, he turns to his companions and declares they should move ahead. But before he can leave, a gentle voice stops him. Aerith Centria has approached, her expression curious as she asks if he is indeed Baskerville Sama. He turns to face her, a slight smile on his lips. He confirms her suspicion, addressing her as Cantry-san, the Academy's third-ranked student. The other students watch the interaction with nervous tension. She then asks if he requires any healing, but he seems to dismiss the offer. He questions what she has been doing for so long, remarking that this is merely a tutorial dungeon. Aerith looks at him earnestly and explains her purpose. She is healing everyone, she says, because she is someone who simply cannot leave the injured all alone. Her selfless declaration hangs in the air. Xenon internally processes her words, viewing Aerith as an incarnation of dedication and sacrifice. He recalls her explanation that moving forward together was more important than the party's goal, a sentiment he dismisses as sweet but naive. He also remembers moments from the game where she would risk her own life to save others in trouble. This admirable behavior, he remembers, always made him anxious when he played the game. He pictures her as she was then, shielding her companions from harm. He finds himself annoyed by this type of person, someone who would sacrifice themselves and give up their own happiness for others. Aerith looks back at him, a question in her eyes, but Xenon's internal monologue concludes that while she is definitely not a bad person, he is irritated nonetheless. His annoyance solidifies into a judgment. He turns away, dismissing her philosophy as absurd. He decides it is not his place to lecture her, resolving to leave that task to the hero. As he walks away, she calls out, asking if something is the matter. Without turning back, Xenon tells her he is going on ahead and offers a piece of parting advice: continue helping others, but to do so in moderation. He continues on his way, firm in his conviction. It is not his role to save Aerith, the wounded saint. That duty, he reasons, belongs to Leon. Freeing her from her cycle of self-sacrifice is the hero's job. Xenon decides that, like a proper villain, he will simply make a stylish exit. His path forward leads him to the precipice of a great chasm, where a long, stone staircase descends into the darkness of the next floor. Down on that fourth floor, a pack of horned, wolf-like monsters with glowing eyes charges through the narrow corridor. Knowing what awaits below, Xenon remains composed. He draws his sword and wipes the blade clean, musing that none of his other classmates could have possibly made it this far. He concludes that the hero's party, Leon, Shell, and Nagisa, must have already reached the lowest floor. He pictures the scene that must have already transpired on that final level. The hero's party facing a massive, draconic beast. In his mind, that monster has probably already been defeated by Leon. He stands amidst the defeated monsters of his first dungeon, feeling a bit unsatisfied with the ease of it all. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoes from deeper within the cavern, cutting through the silence. The terribly nervous voice sends a jolt through him. Ahead, he sees the frantic clash of steel. Realizing the immediate danger, he bellows a warning to get back, shouting that they will die if they don't move. His eyes focus on the scene. Leon Praise stands with his sword and shield raised, attempting to protect a female classmate who has fallen to the ground. Xenon's expression hardens as he assesses the dire situation. The source of their struggle is a monstrous gargoyle, a winged beast of immense power. A shocking realization hits Xenon. This creature is supposed to be a boss from the dungeon's lowest floor. The gargoyle strikes down the helpless girl as Leon screams in fury. The beast growls its desire to kill all humans. Xenon's mind flashes back to the game's plot. This is the event where Leon awakens his hero's blood to drive the monster back. He questions why it's happening here, so far from the lowest floor. He recalls a forgotten detail from the game's lore. The gargoyle had fled from somewhere else, killing several classmates in its panicked escape. This was not its intended location. He sees the faces of Leon, Shell, and Nagisa, the party that was supposed to face this threat together. The grim reality returns. Leon kneels over the body of his classmate, crushed by guilt. He blames himself, believing it was his fault for letting the enemy escape that she had to die. Watching from the shadows, Xenon coldly processes the scene. A minor character was compelled to die for the sake of the plot. He understands that if Leon continues on this path of failure, he is the one who will ultimately be killed, failing to fulfill his destiny. Leon's cry of anguish fills the cavern. Xenon reaffirms his decision. For Leon to grow, to truly hate the demon race and become the hero the world needs, this tragic death is a necessary sacrifice. Helping them now would be the wrong move, a disruption to the grand narrative. He considers the fork in Destiny's road. If he extends a hand now, the future where Leon saves the world might change. Though he acknowledges the sadness of the moment, he concludes there is no choice but to ignore it. He turns his back, walking away from the tragedy to preserve the timeline. As he walks away, the desperate exchange between Leon and his classmate echoes behind him. Leon urges her to run, insisting it's over for him, but she defiantly refuses to leave him behind. The sound of her resolve makes him clench his fist, his decision to remain uninvolved beginning to waver. Just as Leon and Aerith brace for their demise, certain they are about to die, a massive explosion erupts from an unseen source. The blast tears through the air with a deafening boom, completely engulfing the gargoyle. Stunned and splattered with the creature's remains, they can only stare in disbelief at their sudden, impossible rescue. The gargoyle lets out a final, agonized shriek as the torrent of energy obliterates it. The attack came from Xenon, who now stands with a look of intense frustration. He internally curses his own weakness, realizing with bitter resignation that the cold, detached role of a villain simply doesn't suit him. As the confrontation unfolds, Leon Praise recognizes the man before him, identifying him as Baskerville. Leon passionately declares that a true hero cannot grow stronger through a rewritten scenario, and that he will not abandon his classmates. Below them, a massive winged gargoyle roars, questioning the human's audacity. Xenon simply raises a finger to his lips, silencing Leon. He then turns his attention to the beast, laughing manically at its threat. Xenon mocks the creature, stating that a mere tutorial boss has no right to bark such orders. With a dark orb of energy forming in his hand, he leaps forward to engage the monster. As he soars through the air, his confidence swells. He proclaims himself a truly great villain, one that even the protagonist cannot defeat, and questions how a mere mob monster could ever stand in his way before demanding it simply die for him. His dark energy attack slams into the gargoyle, shattering the ground upon impact. The beast shrieks in pain. Landing gracefully, Xenon observes the creature and notes with some surprise that it is quite tough, even as the monster itself seems to curse its own futility. His expression sours with annoyance. He internally recalls that this specific gargoyle possesses the strength of a mid-game monster, comparing its resilience to that of a stiff, unyielding wooden doll. In response, he summons a blade of darkness, invoking the skill Shadow Edge, and slashes at the beast. The attack connects, but he realizes with his starting equipment, a rusty sword, he he cannot land a single effective blow. The gargoyle lets out a cry, but seems largely unharmed. The failed physical attack leads him to a quick analysis. The creature has high physical stats, but low magic resistance. This means his only option is to attack with magic. A grimace crosses his face as he considers the sheer number of spells he might need to cast to bring it down. He puts some distance between them, acknowledging the reality of the situation. This is an enemy designed to be fought by a full party. Unfortunately for him, he is a solo player. Across the broken ground, the gargoyle bellows its intent to kill him. Despite the odds, a look of sharp determination replaces his frustration. He decides to end it all at once with a single critical hit, charging forward as he declares to the beast that he knows its weakness. His declaration proves true as he pinpoints the glowing spot on the gargoyle's chest. He thrusts his sword directly into this place, causing the creature to let out a final, agonized shriek as the critical blow lands. He recalled a fundamental rule of this world. All enemy characters in the game Dambaré possess a designated weak point. For the gargoyle, that weak point was just under its chin. A successful strike there would register as a critical hit. With this knowledge, a cruel smile spread across his face as he taunted the beast. He mused on how humiliating it must be for an event boss to be killed by a lesser opponent. A fitting revenge for a creature that bullies the weak. The gargoyle could only growl a guttural curse in response. The creature reeled back in shock, but it was too late. Xenon thrust his hand forward, unleashing a torrent of dark energy as he invoked the name of his spell, Hellflare. The dark flames erupted, completely engulfing the gargoyle. It let out a final, agonized shriek as the magic tore it apart from within. As the creature's screams faded, its stone body lay shattered on the cavern floor. Xenon reflected that the strongest starting job in the game was the magic swordsman, the class chosen by both him and Leon. With such power, he knew there was no way he could have lost to a weak, early game boss. He savored the feeling of his first proper victory in this new world. While he was uncertain how defeating this event monster would affect the main story, he chose to celebrate the fact that he had saved a life that was supposed to be lost. With that thought, he turned his attention toward the others. Approaching the pair, he called out, asking if they were all right. Leon was kneeling on the ground, tending to the still unconscious Aerith. His gaze then fell upon several empty glass vials scattered on the floor. It was clear they had run out of healing potions. Leon looked up at him, a sheen of sweat on his brow and a look of desperation on his face. Seeing their plight, Xenon held out a couple of items from his own inventory. He told Leon to use them, stating the obvious fact that they were in need. Leon's eyes widened in complete surprise. Leon stammered his thanks, accepting the items while admitting he had nothing to give in return. Xenon dismissed his concern, saying the items were cheap. He glanced down, noting that Aerith looked okay now and expressing his relief that they both survived. Just then, Aerith began to stir. Kneeling beside his companions, Leon expresses his deep gratitude towards Xenon for both the healing potion and for defeating the gargoyle. Another student bows low to the ground, adding his own thanks for being saved. Xenon dismisses their gratitude, stating it was only natural since they are classmates. The student remains bowed, admitting that he hadn't expected such a powerful monster to appear in the dungeon and had let his guard down. His regret intensifies as he pounds his fists against the stone floor. He blames himself as the party's leader for the deaths of his friends, crying out that it was his fault. Watching him, Xenon internally identifies the monster as an irregular, an anomaly, and reflects that their loss wouldn't have truly mattered. He then speaks to the distraught student, advising that if he feels responsible, he should focus on getting stronger to protect his friends in the future. Xenon is inwardly surprised, noting the student's strong sense of responsibility, a quality too noble for a mere background character. Looking up with renewed determination, the student agrees, vowing to become stronger, just like Baskerville. Xenon deflects the sentiment, suggesting that the student doesn't need to use him as an example and that simply doing his best throughout his academy life is sufficient. The student, however, insists on apologizing properly, admitting he had misunderstood Xenon. He confesses to hearing rumors that Xenon was annoying and bows his head in a formal, sincere apology. Xenon's eyes widen slightly at the apology. The student continues, explaining that he thought Xenon was a much worse person because of his scary face and his family's bad reputation, but now realizes he's a good guy. Caught off guard, Xenon quietly acknowledges that he is aware of his reputation. Bowing deeply, the student confesses how wrong he was. He recalls how his group ignored Xenon in the classroom. Yet Xenon went out of his way to share healing potions and risk his life to save them. He begs for forgiveness. The earnest plea leaves Xenon completely flustered. He internally reflects on his social awkwardness, realizing this is the first proper conversation he's had with a classmate. Embarrassed, he clears his throat and attempts to downplay the situation by agreeing that his face is scary and the Baskerville name is associated with evil. Before holding out a small item, he gives the student a small, smoking censer, identifying it as monster-repelling magic incense. Xenon tells him to use it to get out safely and announces that he will be going on ahead, leaving the student staring at the unexpected gift. He explains to the student that the incense should be effective against the enemies found in this part of the dungeon, but clarifies that it only works on weak monsters. The student, overwhelmed with gratitude, acknowledges his repeated debt to Xenon and vows to repay the favor one day. With a casual thumbs up, Xenon tells the student not to worry, suggesting he can repay him upon his own success. He then turns and proceeds alone into the dungeon's depths, leaving behind the dispatched forms of several wolf-like creatures. His destination is the lowest level of the dungeon, an area known as the Playground of the Wise. Elsewhere in the dungeon, Leon Praise catches a glimpse of a figure in a distant corridor. Recognizing him instantly, he shouts out Xenon Baskerville's name in shock. He approaches the group, his expression serious as he asks if they are all right, before remarking that, as expected of a hero's descendant, Leon seems to have handled things. A bewildered Leon, with a scratch on his cheek, demands to know how Xenon was aware of their peril, a suspicion dawning on him as he questions if Xenon was the one who intervened. Xenon casually dismisses the intensity of the question, stating he is unsure why Leon is upset. He explains that he merely surmised they had also run into the powerful monster that had appeared in the dungeon a short time ago. The explanation stuns Leon. He asks if Xenon, too, was attacked by the creature, calling his lack of injury a miracle. Xenon confirms his own safety, but adds that other classmates were not so fortunate. The weight of this news crushes Leon, who cries out in despair, blaming himself for letting the monster escape. As Leon spirals into guilt, HEROINE'S quickly refutes his self-blame. She tearfully insists that it wasn't his fault, reminding him that he protected both her and Nagisa, and that without him, they might have died. He collapses to his knees, tears streaming down his face as he slams his fist into the ground. He screams in anguish, lamenting that if only he had properly defeated his foe, his classmates would have been safe. Overwhelmed by his failure, he cries out about his own powerlessness, questioning what it even means to be the descendant of a hero. As he seethes with frustration, Nagisa watches him with a quiet, unreadable expression. Beside her, Xenon looks on, his gaze fixed on the distraught hero, a single word echoing in his thoughts: Leon. The group stands before the sealed entrance to the dungeon's lowest floor. Xenon, however, seems unconcerned by the display, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips as he runs a hand through his hair. He recalls the original game's scenario. In that timeline, the enemy Leon failed to defeat would go on to kill one of their classmates. It was this intense regret that was meant to trigger the hero's dramatic growth. But now, in this altered timeline where no one died, he wonders what will become of the protagonist. With the key event changed, he questions if Leon can still achieve the same growth he was supposed to. In the aftermath of the battle, Leon Praise slams his fist into the stone floor, his face contorted with anguish. Blood spatters from his knuckles as he cries out, unable to forgive himself for his weakness. As he seethes, Nagisa Saikai kneels beside him, with HEROINE'S looking on in concern. Nagisa insists he shouldn't blame himself, reminding him that despite some injuries, he saved them. If it weren't for him, she and their classmates would have fared far worse. Watching from a distance, Xenon Baskerville remains unmoved. He internally dismisses the scene, deciding to focus only on what he can definitively do now. He briefly wonders how Leon will grow from this experience, but concludes it's impossible to guess. He turns to depart, announcing his exit and casually telling Leon to be careful on the way back. Leon looks up, calling out to Baskerville, and asking if he still needs something. He tells Leon to speak quickly if he has something to say, as he needs to hurry on. After a moment of tense hesitation, Leon looks down, his face shadowed, and utters a single, quiet phrase, "Thank you." The simple words stun Xenon. He watches, shocked, as Leon, who had been so hostile until now, bows deeply. Leon explains his gratitude is for Xenon cleaning up his mess and for giving medicine to their injured classmates. He then turns his head away, a faint blush on his cheeks, and adds a stern warning, but don't get me wrong. A realization dawns on Xenon. This is exactly as it should be. The protagonist is following the path he must. Leon clarifies his stance, vowing he will never forgive an evildoer and that Xenon will get what he deserves one day. Hearing this, Xenon simply smirks to himself and walks away. As his figure recedes down the corridor, Leon calls out, "Baskerville." His path is blocked, however, by Nagisa Saikai. Her expression is serious, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. She looks him directly in the eye and asks, "You were the one who defeated the gargoyle, weren't you?" He meets her intense gaze with a confident smirk. After a brief pause, he nonchalantly confirms her suspicion. "So what if it was me?" He stands before Nagisa, who smiles with satisfaction. She confirms that her eyes did not deceive her. In the entire class, only his aura was completely different. She then proposes they spar sometime, asserting that one can only become stronger by fighting powerful opponents. As Nagisa walks away, he scratches the back of his head in frustration, realizing that troublesome people have now taken notice of him and that tough times are likely ahead. He continues down the stone corridor, his path leading to a large, empty chamber. At the far end, atop a short flight of stairs, sits a single, ornate throne, glowing faintly in the darkness. With the dungeon now cleared, he reflects on completing the mission largely uninjured. On the seat of the throne rests a small box containing several medals, the proof that one has cleared the sage's playground. He picks up one of the medals, recalling the difficult fight with the gargoyle. He had initially thought just driving it away would suffice, but now understands that leaving without the medal would nullify the clear, a classic mistake for players of the game. A thought then occurs to him. Did Leon and the others remember to grab their medals? He wouldn't be surprised if they forgot, and offers a silent condolence if that's the case. With that settled, he considers his next move. Turning his attention to a seemingly solid stone wall, he presses his hand against it. A section of the wall gives way, revealing a hidden passage. Beyond the secret door lies a vast chamber, overflowing with mountains of gold coins, gleaming armor, enchanted weapons, and other priceless treasures. He throws himself into the hoard with unrestrained glee. He recognizes this place instantly, the room of the nouveau riche. A wave of excitement washes over him as he realizes this secret room isn't supposed to appear until a player has cleared the dungeon at least twice. The sheer scale of the treasure trove is immense, a glittering testament to a reward far exceeding normal expectations. He immediately spots a valuable prize among the treasures, a magic bag. Recognizing its function from the game, he exclaims in delight as he sees it can hold the vast quantities of coins from a nearby chest. It was a key item, a special category of valuable that allowed for the infinite storage of gold and items gathered from previous dungeon clears. He wastes no time, using the bag to absorb the mountains of gold and countless items. Leaping into the air, he roars with laughter, realizing he has suddenly become a billionaire. His initial euphoria gives way to a determined focus. With the bag in hand, he prepares to loot everything from the vast, treasure-strewn chamber. As he moves to begin, a sharp, agonizing pain erupts from his chest. He clutches at himself as dark, crackling veins of energy spread across his hand and up his arm. The intense sensation seems to guide his focus, drawing his eyes to a single weapon half buried in the hoard, a greatsword radiating a powerful, dark aura. He recognizes it instantly as the Demon Blade, Heavenly Feather Cutter. This was the very weapon he had wielded in the game, a curved blade like a Japanese katana, marked with crimson veins. He recalls the countless hours spent strengthening it, commissioning blacksmiths and gathering materials until it surpassed even the ultimate holy sword exprave. His beloved sword had come to this world too. He lifts the blade, feeling its power. He knows that with maxed out skills, it could deal massive damage even to the Demon King on hard mode. A chilling thought begins to form. If this sword is here, then what does that mean? The thought solidifies as he gazes across the treasure-filled room. He questions if this entire chamber, with all its contents, is filled with items based on his own save data from the game. The existence of these specific, personalized items leads to an inescapable conclusion. He realizes with a jolt that his saved data from the game he played, Damburay, has somehow manifested in this world. He grappled with the impossible reality, his mind racing. A single, burning question echoed in the darkness. Who in the world could have made this happen? Standing amidst the glittering spoils of his past life, he questioned who could have orchestrated this, and for what purpose. It became clear that he hadn't ended up in this world, in Xenon's body, by his own will. Someone had intentionally willed him to be reincarnated here. The implications were staggering. This was no coincidence. There had to be a meaning behind it. He wondered why he was reincarnated as a side character like Xenon, and not the protagonist, Leon. Whether a god or a devil was behind this, their goal remained a mystery. And most perplexing of all, how did they manage to bring his game's save data into this world? With these heavy questions weighing on him, he finally emerged from the dungeon's stone archway. As he stepped back into the open air, a familiar voice called out his family name. He turned to see the academy teacher who had overseen their field training. She tossed a small metallic object toward him. He caught it instinctively, looking down to see a gleaming medal in his palm. Xenon Baskerville can, she announced formally, clapping her hands together. I hereby acknowledge that you have cleared the sage's playground. The other students, including Leon's party, looked on in surprise. He processed her words, realizing this hadn't been simple field training, but a test. He was thankful that Leon and the others hadn't noticed his activities. The teacher confirmed his success, explaining that she would now permit him to explore other dungeons. She added a word of caution, telling him it was good he remained safe despite the gargoyle's appearance, and that he shouldn't push himself too hard. As he walked through the academy grounds, his thoughts turned to the vast arsenal he had just acquired. He couldn't equip most of the powerful items from the room of the nouveau riche as he was now. His current skill proficiency was too low. He understood that there were limits to going solo, especially in high-level dungeons. He needed to find companions. He briefly considered leaving himself some weaker weapons to use, but quickly dismissed the idea. There was no point in doing that. Given his situation, the only logical path forward was to focus on raising his skill proficiency. He considers the potential dangers ahead. While he could use medicine to counteract poison, he would be utterly helpless against paralysis or petrification without a companion capable of purification. The conclusion is unavoidable. Having allies is essential. Yet, he scoffs at the thought, acutely aware that he is a loner. His mind races through the options. He recalls a mercenary heroine from the game, located in Damburay, but hiring her comes with downsides. Mercenaries can't be fully trusted and might flee or steal his loot in a crisis. The alternative, available in the Slayer Kingdom, is to purchase slaves at auction. Bound by enslavement magic, they are forced to swear semi-permanent loyalty. Unlike Leon, he has no capable companions among his classmates, leaving him with only two viable, if unappealing, choices: mercenaries or slaves. A bead of sweat traces its way down his temple. As someone with the sensibilities of a modern Japanese person, he finds himself hesitating at the abhorrent idea of purchasing another human being. But in a situation where his very life is on the line, he realizes with grim certainty that he has no other choice. The stark realization hits him with full force. In this world, there are no second chances. Walking down a cobblestone street, his face is a mask of grim resolve. He reflects that he can't have it both ways. The option to simply quit doesn't exist. To survive, faithful subordinates are an absolute necessity, even if that means resorting to owning slaves. His path leads him toward a massive, multi-peaked tent structure bustling with people. This is a slave auction, a place where greed and desire intertwine, and where his difficult decision will become a reality. At a lavish, dimly lit venue, a stout man in a top hat and uniform greets Zenon Baskerville with a flourish. Recognizing him as the young master of the Baskerville family, the man welcomes him warmly and directs him to a seat in the front row. Zenon accepts with a curt word of thanks. From his seat, he contemplates his grim purpose. He acknowledges that in order to confront his father, who sits at the pinnacle of the underworld, he will need his own subordinates. This necessity forces him to associate with the repulsive slave traders hosting the event. Moments later, the auctioneer takes the stage. With a booming voice, he addresses the respected guests, announcing that the slave auction will now begin. The crowd of wealthy patrons watches with anticipation. The first lots are brought out: a small, chain girl, a muscular man, and a woman with long, wavy hair. The bidding is immediate and fierce, with prices soaring from 100,000 to 700,000. Zenon observes the frantic exchange with a cold, analytical gaze. After one bid successfully closes at 800,000, the auctioneer presents the next individual, a beautiful, blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy, starting at 100,000. A wave of excitement ripples through the audience as the boy is led onto the stage, and Zenon watches intently. He assesses his own financial situation. His pockets are filled to the brim with gold coins he looted from the room of a nouveau riche, and he feels confident he has more than enough to purchase one or two slaves for his cause. He considers what he needs. A slave with strong combat skills will be useful. His fingers close around an ornate, circular metal device he holds in his palm. He brings the item to his eye. It is the God's Eye, which he also picked up from the nouveau riche's room. He knows its primary function is to appraise the abilities of monsters, but he intends to use it for a different purpose. Looking through the God's Eye, he scans a new group of slaves on the stage. The device displays their hidden attributes, and a shocking realization hits him. Before him stand Leon Praise, Nagisa Saikai, Aerith Centria, and Shell Uranus, the hero and heroines from the game, all chained and presented for sale. He lowers the device, his mind racing. With this tool, it will be easy to see if any of them possess skills useful in combat. He reflects that he has no need for someone with a simple charm skill. He needs true strength. He continued to observe the slaves on display, a sense of disappointment growing within him. None of the talents presented possessed the specific skills he was looking for. He mused that while skills could be acquired later, innate abilities always grew at a much faster rate. Having found no one suitable, he turned his back to the stage and began walking away, descending the steps from his private viewing box. Just as he resolved to search for a different method to recruit subordinates, the auctioneer's voice boomed, announcing the final slave of the day. The announcement stopped him in his tracks. The host enthusiastically presented an Oni girl brought from the northern demi-human continent, a race whose rarity was said to rival that of the dragonkin. Zenon's head snapped back toward the stage. His eyes widened in utter disbelief as he recognized the girl on stage. The features were unmistakable: white hair, white skin, golden pupils, and crimson horns, the trademarks of the Oni. A name surfaced in his mind, a name that shouldn't exist here: Ulza Whitiger. He was stunned, questioning why she was in this place. On the auction block, the young Oni girl stood passively in her chains. Zenon's thoughts raced. It was impossible. Ulza was not originally a character from the world of Dambaray. He recalled memories from his past life. Ulza was first released in Warlord of the Holy See, a separate war simulation game made by the same developers. It took place in an island nation where the objective was to gather allies for war. Ulza was one of those allies. Her presence here made no sense. A deep unease settled over him. The boundaries between the game scenarios were blurring. He gripped his chin, wondering what exactly was happening to this world. As Zenon grappled with this revelation, the auctioneer hyped up the crowd, explaining that the Oni race is extremely rare, ages slowly, and possesses excellent physical prowess. The audience erupted into a frenzy of bids, starting at 500,000 and rapidly climbing into the millions. He watched the chaos of the auction unfold, a single, world-shattering question echoing in his mind. This reality seemed to be blending the settings from the games Damburay 1, Damburay 2, and Holy See. Or, he wondered, were they perhaps the same world all along? As the bidding climbed past 5 million, his thoughts raced. He reasoned that since both games were from the same developer, it wasn't entirely strange for their backstories to be connected, even if their main stages were different. A status screen confirmed her identity, Ulza Whittaker, possessing skills in physical reinforcement, super strength, and hammer mastery. He processed the information. 3 and 8, combat-related skills. She was undoubtedly the ideal talent he had been searching for. But a complication arose. If the world of Holy See was truly connected, then Ulza should follow that game scenario. He recalled that she begins as a slave before becoming a companion to the main character. He wondered if this auction was that very plot point. If he purchased her, he risked being caught up in the story of Holy See and its protagonist. His gaze drifted from the stage, across the opulent hall, to his private viewing box where his maid watched silently. The auctioneer's voice boomed, announcing a bid of 6.5 million. As he called for other bids, Xenon stood, his expression hardening. On the stage, the chain girl, Ulza, remained with her head bowed. With a sharp, decisive motion, he raised his hand. 10 million, he declared. The sheer magnitude of the bid caused Ulza to gasp and look up, her eyes wide with disbelief as she stared out into the crowd. A wave of shock rippled through the audience. One noble muttered about the brazenness of jumping the price so high. Another scoffed that 10 million was far too much for a single girl. Unmoved, Xenon held his ground. A moment of self-awareness struck him. He had really done it this time. With 10 million, he could have equipped an entire party with the strongest gear imaginable and challenged a final boss. But he remembered her fate. In the original story, Ulza is rescued by the Holy See protagonist, but not before her spirit is shattered by the sickening cruelty of the nobles. He reasoned that perhaps his actions here, disruptive as they were, could change the outcome of that future war. Knowing the tragedy that awaited her, he couldn't just ignore it. The protagonist of Holy See could handle a few changes to the plot. In the end, he realized he couldn't bring himself to be a complete villain. As his resolve solidified, the auctioneer's voice cut through the silence. There it is, a bid of 10 million. Is there anyone who will compete with this handsome youth? The auction host and the surrounding crowd were left speechless, stammering at the sheer audacity of the 10 million bid. From his seat, Xenon Baskerville leaned back with a smirk, internally convinced that no one could possibly compete with his perfected villainous scowl. Below him, the Oni girl, Ulza, looked up, her eyes wide with a dawning sense of hope. He leaned forward slightly, speaking directly to her. He promised to help her, and his words brought a faint blush to her cheeks. The moment was shattered when the auctioneer, sweating profusely, announced that another gentleman had raised the bid to 10,500,000. He frantically scanned the room, asking for any other bids. Without a change in his expression, Xenon raised the bid to a staggering 12 million. The auctioneer stammered in disbelief, and with no other counters, he slammed his gavel down. He announced that the Oni girl was sold for 12 million and called for a grand round of applause for the young man. The hall erupted in a roar of applause from the astonished crowd. Xenon simply raised a hand in acknowledgement, letting out a quiet, satisfied grunt. After settling the payment, Xenon waited in a private backstage room, holding the now empty case that had contained the fortune. The curtains before him parted, and Ulza was led into the room, coming to a stop on the rug before him. To his complete surprise, the girl rushed forward and wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. With a cheerful giggle, she introduced herself as Ulza and declared it was nice to meet her new master. She looked up at him with sparkling eyes, vowing to devote herself to working for his sake and asking him to love her forever. Xenon was stunned. He internally questioned this behavior, remembering that in the game Holy See, Ulza was always expressionless like a doll. He wondered if this vibrant personality was her true self. He stared, his mind struggling to reconcile the stoic character from the game with the girl before him, who seemed as cheerful and eager as a puppy. He wondered if this could be her true nature, the personality she had before her enslavement. As he stood lost in thought, Ulza looked up at him with concern, asking what was wrong. He quickly brushed it off, claiming it was nothing. His practical concerns then took over. Realizing he couldn't bring her back to his home dressed in her current state, he turned to the auction host. Lesbold, he began, do you have a change of clothes? The host, Lesbold, chuckled with a knowing smile. He confirmed Xenon's suspicion, stating that he believed there would be something appropriate in the slave's waiting room, and gestured towards a curtain changing area. As Lesbold prepared to lead her away, Ulza hesitated, expressing that she didn't want to go. Xenon gently reassured her, telling her to go with the host and that there was nothing to fear. He promised he would be waiting for her right there, prompting her to ask if he would truly wait. With his promise made, Lesbold guided the reluctant girl behind the heavy curtain of the changing room. Xenon stood patiently on the checkered floor, waiting. A moment later, Ulza's voice called out from behind the partition, announcing she was done. All right, Xenon responded, come out and show me. The curtain stirred and then parted at the bottom, revealing a pair of polished, dark shoes stepping forward onto the tiled floor. Ulza Whittaker emerges from behind a curtain, presenting her new clothes with a cheerful tada. Xenon, looking on with surprise, points out that simply putting on shoes isn't a full change of clothes, but Olza is just happy to have footwear. As he watches her, the auction host advises him against his next impulse. Ignoring the warning, Xenon declares his intention to remove her collar, which bears his own name, Xenon Vaskerville, engraved upon its surface. In response, Olza herself explains the danger of such an act. She clarifies that if he removed the collar, she would become an ownerless slave, a perilous status. The collar, she points out, is proof that he is her owner. Xenon, with his arms crossed, presses for more specific details about these dangers. The auction host elaborates, stating that a slave collar is their proof of ownership, and that slaves without owners possess no human rights whatsoever. The grim reality is illustrated by the image of a brutalized demi-human. Olza explains that because she belongs to the highly valued Oni race, if she were found without a collar, anyone could kidnap or assault her without it even being considered a crime. A wave of nausea hits Xenon as he remembers this harsh truth. The auction host confirms his fears, warning that if her ownership isn't clearly marked, someone would undoubtedly try to take her from him. The social structure of the Slayer Kingdom is laid bare. Demi-humans are of low status, existing in towns only as slaves. The kingdom's poor relations with Elven and Dwarven nations reinforces this prejudice. Olza's horns clearly mark her as a demi-human, and the absence of a collar would signify she is a runaway, subject to horrific treatment. Despite this, Xenon internally rebels at the idea of keeping anyone in a collar. Sensing his hesitation, Olza beams, assuring him that she doesn't mind. She holds the collar, declaring that she likes it a lot, because it is proof that she belongs to him. Xenon is taken aback by her cheerful acceptance. He relents, though not fully convinced. He decides that if she's truly fine with it, he will go along with her wishes for now and not worry about it further. With the matter settled, the auction host steps forward, offering to show them to their room. He informs them that they will be left undisturbed for a while, free to take their time. After leading them into a lavishly decorated room with a large, round bed, the auction host bids them farewell. Left alone, Xenon watches him leave, a bead of sweat on his brow as he wonders if the man has gravely misunderstood the situation. As Xenon stands bewildered, Olza cheerfully begins to disrobe, pulling off her tunic. With a bright, innocent smile, she announces that she is ready to get started. Her action sends a jolt of panic through Xenon. He flails his arms and shouts in a flustered voice, demanding to know why she is suddenly stripping. He frantically tries to get her to put her clothes back on, but Olza looks at him with genuine confusion, asking if they aren't going to be making babies. Xenon vehemently denies it, shouting that he has no interest in little girls and that there's no way they're doing that, especially since he's still fully clothed himself. Having averted the misunderstanding, Xenon pokes Olza on the forehead to get her attention. He states firmly that they're going to get her proper equipment, as she cannot possibly enter a dungeon looking as she does now. The word dungeon makes Olza's face flush with excitement. As she repeats the word, Xenon sits on the bed and clarifies his true motive. He has no interest in making her sex slave. He bought her to increase his combat power for dungeon exploration. Upon hearing this, Olza is overcome with joy. She exclaims that she is happy and that she loves to fight. For her, even as a slave, the opportunity to go into a dungeon is a dream come true. Her happiness takes on a ferocious edge. With a chillingly gleeful expression, she talks about killing and stealing a lot, saying she's really looking forward to it. Xenon realizes this must be because Oni are a warrior race who enjoy fighting. Her bloodthirsty declaration leaves him momentarily speechless. Looking down at a case in his hands, he internally remarks that he doesn't know how to react to her saying such scary things with such an adorable face. He can only manage a quiet, "I see." Having accepted her nature, Xenon reveals his next step. He stands before a massive, glittering pile of armor, weapons, shields, and various other pieces of adventuring equipment, presenting it all to her. He gestures to the pile of equipment, explaining that while he can't equip these items himself, he had stocked up on them in case a woman ever joined his team. He offers her a small, coin-like accessory to start with. She eagerly accepts, and he instructs her to try everything on, assuring her they can make adjustments if there are any problems. A moment later, Olza stands transformed in a new dark, two-piece combat outfit. Flexing an arm, she declares that the equipment is both nice and comfortable, leaving Xenon momentarily speechless. She quickly finishes donning the rest of her new gear, piece by piece, including sturdy boots and protective gauntlets, all while her slave collar remains fixed around her neck. Her eyes light up as she examines a massive, spiked club, marveling that such fine armor and weapons exist even in the human kingdoms. This particular weapon is an Oni's club, a tyrannical blunt instrument that drops from orcs and goblins. In the original game, it was largely ignored due to a lack of characters proficient with blunt weapons, making it a perfect fit for her. Clutching the weapon with fierce glee, she vows to put her all into slaughtering her master's enemies, confident she can now take on any foe. Xenon laughs, pleased that she likes her new tool. Her excitement overflows as she giggles and suddenly wraps herself around Xenon's leg in a tight hug. Startled, he yelps, asking if it doesn't hurt her, and internally questions if all Oni are this fanatical about fighting. Following the hug, she looks up and declares her love for her master. The statement throws Xenon completely off balance. He demands to know why she is so attached, reminding her they just met moments ago and that he only bought her to help him fight in dungeons. Ulza's response is simple and direct. She explains that her master is cool and handsome, so she is happy to belong to such a wonderful gentleman, adding that she has a thing for good-looking guys. Xenon is utterly baffled, unable to process that she is referring to him. His mind flashes back to his own self-perception, a man with sharply angled eyes and a hawk-like nose, whose appearance made girls give him a wide berth and scream in terror when he laughed. He wonders if Ulza has even seen his face properly. He asks if she is serious, and Ulza enthusiastically confirms. She then details her ideal physical type: a pointy, evil-looking nose, fierce eyes that could kill with a glance, and sharp teeth that could tear flesh. To her, these are the features of a legendary Oni god, the epitome of handsome. She continues, her eyes sparkling, declaring that it must have been fate for her to be bought by such a lovely master. She confesses it was love at first sight the moment their eyes met at the auction. The praise is so overwhelming that Xenon feels tears welling up, a completely new experience for him. Despite her words being of the highest order of admiration, he finds it impossible to feel complimented. He struggles to compose himself, covering his mouth. Ultimately, he reasons that her affection, however strange, is better than her hating him. Trying to convince himself that he's satisfied with this outcome, he abruptly tells Ulza that since she's done changing, it's time for them to go. As they prepare to depart, the auction host observes them with a knowing smile. He comments on their brief visit and Ulza's affectionate nature, adding a sly remark about the young master's potency. Unfazed, Ulza chirps in agreement and eagerly dashes out of the room ahead of Xenon. The host bows deeply, promising to procure more high-quality slaves for Xenon's future visits. Xenon, however, cuts him off with a cold look, stating that it's too much trouble to even bother correcting his assumptions. With their business concluded, the two of them walk down a quiet, lamplit cobblestone street under the night sky. He finds the solitude of the night a relief, free from the judging stares he usually endures. The journey back to his estate will take about an hour, and he hopes to arrive before sunrise. His attention shifts to Ulza, who skips along beside him, humming a tune. He marvels at how she carries the heavy, spiked club with such ease, moving as lightly as a bunny. Suddenly, he feels a gentle tug on the back of his coat. Ulza's voice, soft and questioning, calls out to her master. He turns to face her. She looks up at him with innocent curiosity, her large club resting on her shoulder, and asks what's wrong. Her simple question triggers a sudden, shocking realization in Xenon's mind, his expression frozen in disbelief. His walk through the city streets was abruptly interrupted. From the shadows of a narrow alley, three menacing figures emerged, their stances aggressive as they moved to block his path. The trio was merely the vanguard. From an overhead perspective, the full extent of the trap became clear. He and Ulza were being systematically encircled by a large group of armed men moving in from all sides. As the thugs closed their circle, a familiar, portly figure stepped forward. It was the auction host. Well, we meet again, the man announced. Xenon, with Ulza peering from behind him, assessed the situation coolly. An ambush, huh? Good work. The auction host's face twisted into a smug, predatory grin, his eyes narrowing with undisguised malicious intent. The man was incensed by the lack of recognition, shouting that someone who paid 12 million should surely remember him. He lamented being treated like a mere pebble on the roadside. Xenon, however, remained utterly unfazed, simply asking, "Who were you again?" His feigned ignorance gave way to a flicker of understanding. A small sound of realization escaped him as he connected the man to the auction. Ah, he mused aloud. So it was thanks to you that I ended up spending more than I expected. He then fixed his gaze on the host, his expression turning to one of contempt. So what business does a loser have with me? Xenon asked, adding a pointed remark about the man needing to bring along a group of scary friends. The host flinched at the insult, but quickly recovered, offering a mock apology about the nature of winning and losing at auctions. With a sinister smile, he extended a veiled threat, inviting Xenon to join their fun party. Xenon internally confirmed his suspicions. The man hadn't given up on Ulza and planned to take her by force, a predictable and boring development. As he thought this, Ulza spoke from behind him, asking if she could steal the host. She then issued a chilling ultimatum to their attackers. Hand her over, and they might escape with only broken bones. The threat hung in the air. In the center of the cobblestone alley, Xenon and Ulza stood alone, completely encircled by the auction host and his gang of armed thugs, poised to strike. He stood his ground, a bulwark between the girl and the encroaching thugs. From the mouth of the alley, the auction host, less bold, made his desperate demand, pleading for them to hand her over. Unfazed by the dozen armed men surrounding him, Xenon looked up, a slow, menacing smirk spreading across his face. He considered the situation, internally musing on his next move. As the auction host, less bold, chuckles, Xenon turns to him with a sharp gaze. He asks about a particular word, noting that in his own country, it's quite common. Below them, in the courtyard, Ulza is asked by another demi-human what pseudo-human means. She explains that it refers to demi-humans who possess a human-like constitution, though she wonders if it's just a term she knows. A wave of fury washes over Ulza. Standing alone with her weapon, she internally seethes, questioning who first decided that demi-humans were inferior beings. Her unspoken anger is echoed by Xenon's actions. He declares to Lesbold that he will not hand Ulza over, calling her his woman and threatening to send the man packing. Lesbold, who had wanted a peaceful transaction, bristles at the defiance, threatening to kill the undisciplined brat. Hearing Xenon's protective words, Ulza is visibly moved, her eyes wide with emotion. Lesbold, however, knows he cannot back down. He recognizes Xenon as a noble from a family with immense financial resources, but this only fuels his ambition. He believes that if he can acquire the rare Oni girl and offer her to a certain powerful individual, he will be able to secure a position as that person's right hand and ascend to even greater heights. As he watches the man's theatrical movements and listens to his exaggerated tone, a flash of recognition strikes Xenon. With Ulza holding on his arm, he realizes he knows this man and his origins, connecting him to the Chiron kingdom. His suspicion confirmed, Xenon confronts Lesbold directly, stating that the person he seeks to please is Zagitaros, the martial general of the Chiron kingdom. The auction host freezes, his face a mask of pure shock and disbelief. Xenon's mind flashes back to the game's lore. He recalls that Lesbold, a minor character whose name he had forgotten, appears as an enemy alongside Zagitaros in the Holy See scenario. With a confident smirk, he asks Lesbold if his deduction is spot on, prompting a stammer of astonishment from the exposed man. The memories continue to surface. General Zagitaros is a known pervert with a preference for young, demi-human girls of all races. In the original story, Ulza was fated to become his slave, suffering a horrific existence in a vast prison filled with rows of cages holding other captive girls. Everything clicks into place. Xenon now understands that Lesbold's plan was to offer Ulza to Zagitaros to become his aide. He also recalls that in the game, the protagonist saves Ulza and she becomes a companion. With this full picture clear in his mind, Xenon feels a refreshing sense of clarity. Completely cornered, Lesbold stammers, demanding to know how Xenon could possibly be aware of his identity and that of his excellency. Crossing his arms with a smug grin, Xenon coolly replies that he has no obligation to tell him. His wrist is seized by Lesbold, whose face twists in fury. With his identity and scheme exposed, the auction host abandons all pretense. "I'll have you die right here," he snarls, as his hired thugs close in, brandishing their weapons. He remains unfazed, a smirk playing on his lips. Now that the situation is clear, he finds it much easier to handle, declaring that a fight is right up his alley. Though he doesn't understand why a noble from the Chiron kingdom is present, he proclaims he will happily strike back, effortlessly weaving through the attackers and dispatching them with swift strikes. He pauses for a moment, reflecting that he has once again meddled in the protagonist's scenario. He quickly concludes, however, that simply reducing the number of enemies won't cause any real harm to the overall plot. His attention then turns to the Oni girl behind him. He informs Ulza that it's time for her first job and tells her to ready her weapon, calling it a small thank you. Her face lights up with a sharp-toothed, eager grin as she hoists her massive spiked club and shouts her enthusiastic agreement. She looks every bit the warrior, but Xenon holds her back, instructing her to cover his rear for now. Ulza pouts, disappointed at the delay. As she watches, Xenon summons a book into his hand, a grimoire of dark magic. As he begins to chant, glowing runes fill the air. Witnessing the start of a powerful spell, a panicked Lesbold screams at his men to kill Xenon immediately. From behind, Ulza's unique, ringed pupils widen as she watches the spectacle unfold. With a feral shout, Xenon unleashes the dark element area of effect magic. "Blood carpet," he roars as the spell erupts from the ground. The cobblestones erupt with jagged black spikes, impaling the charging thugs. Their agonized screams echo through the narrow alley as they are violently dispatched, leaving only carnage in their wake. He covers his mouth, feeling a wave of sickness from the brutal display. He internally remarks that even he finds the spell gruesome, just like the torture magic his father used to employ, and questions why dark magic is filled with such vile abilities. After composing himself, he turns to Ulza, telling her she can now take care of the man behind him. Her face lights up with savage delight. "I've been waiting for this," she declares, vowing to slaughter every last one as she leaps toward the remaining enemy. She leaps into the fray, shouting a battle cry as she swings her massive, spiked mace at one of Lesbold's thugs. The man can only stare in bewildered shock, unable to react in time. The heavy weapon connects with a sickening crunch, its spikes digging deep. As the first man falls, another thug watches in horror, cursing the small girl as a monster before steeling himself to attack. He lunges, bringing his sword down in a powerful overhead strike. To his utter disbelief, Ulza catches the sharp blade between her fingers without even turning to look, stopping its momentum completely. He desperately tries to pull his weapon free, screaming for her to let go, but the blade is held fast in her unyielding grip. With her other hand, she swings her mace again, which becomes a blur of dark energy as it smashes into the man's head, silencing him permanently. The last man, less bold, scrambles backward, pleading for his life. Olza turns to him with a playful smile, bringing a finger to her lips as she informs him he's the last one left. She states plainly that she cannot spare him, as her duty is to slaughter her master's enemies. Watching from a window above, Xenon smirks, noting that her strength is just as he expected. Below, Olza hurls her mace through the air, sending it flying like a comet toward the final target. Moments later, she reappears before him, cheerfully reporting that the task is complete. Xenon praises her good work and pats her on the head, a reward she accepts with a blissful, contented expression. He then turns his attention back to the alley. Sitting casually on the windowsill, he looks down at the terrified Lesbold. He states that the man's allies are gone, and then coldly asks what should be done with him now. He coolly informs the nobleman, Lesbold, that attacking a Baskerville was already a diplomatic incident. Lesbold, desperate, insists killing him would also create an incident with the Huron kingdom. Xenon dismisses the threat, stating his plan is to simply dispose of the body and evidence, exactly what Lesbold had intended for him. He concludes that the man should have simply accepted his loss at the auction. He reflects on this course of action, having naturally assumed he would kill the nobleman. Despite having already killed 3 people with magic, he realizes with a chilling clarity that he feels no guilt whatsoever. His heart is completely cold to the act, a dark power swirling around him as he processes this unnerving self-realization. This lack of remorse leads him to wonder if he has truly become Xenon Baskerville in body and soul, or if this darkness was always a part of him. Below, Lesbold grovels, pleading for his life and offering all his money. Xenon glances at Olza and remarks that, unfortunately, he isn't in need of cash before giving her a command. In response, Olza hefts her enormous spiked mace, preparing to bring it down on the screaming, terrified Lesbold. She calmly states that she will wait for a signal. As Lesbold's face contorts in pure horror, a strange announcement echoes. Ready, set, go, accompanied by the image of a small, elf-like girl, signaling the start of what appears to be a twisted game. The game begins. Olza swings her mace, obliterating one of Lesbold's remaining thugs in a single, brutal strike. She watches the result with a detached, almost innocent, "Oh my." Immediately after the strike, Xenon's expression shifts to one of shock. He urgently calls Olza back, having suddenly detected a presence that was completely hidden from him moments before. He processes the alarming fact that not only did he fail to notice the newcomer, but even Olza, a member of a warrior race, was oblivious. As this thought crosses his mind, a calm female voice speaks from nearby, assuring him that everything is all right. Startled by the voice, both he and Olza spin around, their senses on high alert. They scan the darkened alley, searching for the speaker, whose location remains a mystery. The unseen woman's voice echoes again, addressing him with unnerving familiarity. There's no need to be wary, Xenon Baskerville Sama. He is suddenly forced to the ground, his face pressed against the cold cobblestones. From the black of night, a shadow emerges, revealing itself to be a powerful foe. A tall, masked figure stands over him, her booted foot pinning his head to the street with disdainful ease. His eyes widen with fury and disbelief as he demands, "Who the hell are you?" Confronting the masked figure who had just dispatched the remaining thugs, Xenon demands to know her identity. The woman introduces herself as a member of the assassination corps under Master Baskerville. Xenon immediately suspects she is one of his father's subordinates sent to surveil him, but she clarifies that the auction host, Lesbold, entrusted her with this duty. She explains that it is quite common for high-profile customers to be attacked on their way home from the auction. Because of this, one of her duties is to escort respected patrons to ensure their safety. The assassin elaborates that auctions are not just a method of commerce, but also a form of high-stakes entertainment and a venue for the wealthy to flaunt their financial power, which naturally attracts predators. Xenon quietly processes this. He realizes that by purchasing an expensive slave and leaving without an escort, he was practically inviting robbers to attack him. From her perch on a nearby rooftop, the assassin observes him, noting that an escort proved unnecessary. She concludes that the future of the Baskerville family is in capable hands, as expected of its successor. He hears her compliment, but dismisses it internally, having no interest in being evaluated as his father's heir. Turning to the young girl beside him, he simply says, "We're going home, Olza." She responds with a cheerful affirmation. The assassin kneels beside the corpse of one of the attackers. "I bid you a safe journey," she says, assuring Xenon that she will deal with the insolent fool's body. As Xenon and Olza walk away into the night, the assassin watches them depart. She looks forward to their next meeting, referring to him in her thoughts as the successor of the Baskerville Hellhound. Later, having returned to his opulent room, Xenon lies down on his bed, letting out an exhausted sigh. He lies awake, reflecting on the night. It has only been 2 weeks since he arrived in this world, and today was the first time he had killed someone. He feels it was necessary and doesn't regret it. Yet he finds his own lack of resistance to the act of murder abnormal. He wonders if he was always such a ruthless person deep down, or if he's being influenced by occupying the mind and body of the original Xenon. He lay in bed, wrestling with a disquieting thought. He felt no guilt whatsoever about committing murder. He recalled his former life as an ordinary working-class Japanese person and couldn't reconcile it with his current state. While he could understand someone from a combat-oriented race like Ulza killing, his own lack of remorse was baffling. Clenching his fist, he resolved that hesitation would mean death in the future, and regardless of the reasoning, he should be happy about this newfound, grim advantage. His thoughts turned to the future. Beyond the hostile monsters in the Damburay dungeon, he knew he would eventually have to face more cunning foes, evil cultists who worshipped the Demon King, pirates, and other criminals. Despite these grim prospects, he decided to look at things positively. A lot had happened, but he now had a reliable companion. With her, he could finally begin to properly explore the dungeon. This ability to defeat enemies without hesitation was a definite strength. As he sat on the edge of his bed, his strategic mind took over. He knew from experience that playing solo eventually leads to a dead end. With Ulza's power, his chances of survival were significantly higher, but a team of just 2 attackers was unbalanced. Ideally, he'd also want a magic user and healer. He calmed himself, reasoning that the scenario was still in its early stages, so there was no need to rush. Suddenly, a piercing cry of "Master!" shattered the quiet. It was Ulza, shouting from within a large, bubble-filled bathtub. Water erupted from the tub as she launched herself out of it. Before Xenon could fully process the shout, a soaking wet Ulza slammed into him. He staggered backward, a nosebleed starting instantly from the shock and impact. She wailed, complaining that her eyes hurt and that the maid was bullying her. At that moment, Leviena appeared in the doorway, wrapped only in a towel and dripping wet. She admonished Ulza, asking what she thought she was doing running to the young master in such a state. Xenon, still reeling with blood on his face, could only stare as his eyes darted between the two. Leviena tried to pull the girl off him, but Ulza clung tight, still crying about her stinging eyes. The maid explained she was just washing her hair and needed to rinse the soap out. Caught in the middle and unable to look away, Xenon realized the Oni race must not use soap and that Ulza had kept her eyes open. Now he was soaked too. Giving up on pulling the surprisingly strong girl away, Leviena sighed. "Forget it," she said, acknowledging the Oni's strength. Her demeanor then shifted as she turned to Xenon with a playful smile. "Young master," she purred, "why don't you get in the bath as well?" Xenon's eyes widened in pure shock. He is completely taken aback by the invitation. Leviena, with a playful smile, asks if the young master is embarrassed after all this time. His mind races, deducing from her casual demeanor that the original Xenon must have shared baths with her regularly. The sight of Ulza already in the tub only adds to his flustered state. To maintain his cover, he quickly rationalizes the situation. He internally insists that he isn't doing this because he wants to, but purely to prevent his true identity from being revealed. If he, as Xenon, suddenly resisted, it would be too suspicious. With a determined clench of his fist, he resolves to get it over with quickly. His resolve is immediately put to the test as Leviena takes his hand, cheerfully announcing their departure. "Then let's go," she says. Overwhelmed and dizzy, he can only manage a week, as she leads him towards the bathroom. Once in the water, the ordeal continues. Ulza, with innocent cheerfulness, begins to gently wash his back. Xenon's face is a mask of tension and acute embarrassment, his body rigid. Soon, all 3 are sharing the large bathtub. Bubbles fill the air as Xenon sits stiffly between the 2 women. While Ulza enjoys the bath, Leviena, positioned behind him, gives a subtle but clear thumbs up as if congratulating him on a job well done. After the bath, a new complication arises. Ulza, now dressed in pajamas and feeling sleepy from the warm water, happily declares her intention to sleep with her master. A shocked Leviena immediately objects, insisting that Ulza's own bed is being prepared for her, but the little Oni girl protests loudly. Xenon looks on in utter horror. The ensuing argument results in a compromise that satisfies no one but the girls. Lying stiffly in bed, Xenon finds himself flanked by a peacefully sleeping Leviena on one side and a murmuring Ulza on the other. His eyes are wide open with stress as he internally despairs. How am I going to sleep like this? The scene pulls back to reveal the vast, opulent bedroom, where the enormous bed only serves to highlight his predicament. Trapped between the 2 sleeping women, he silently screams to himself, questioning what kind of cruel trial he is being subjected to. Morning finally arrives, the sun casting light upon the mansion. Xenon lies awake, his face etched with exhaustion from the sleepless, unforgettable night. He internally swears to an unseen god that he did absolutely nothing, not even lifting a finger towards either of them. He remains pinned in place, a living mattress for the 2 soundly sleeping women. With Leviena's head on his chest and Ulza curled up by his side, he stares at the ceiling in quiet desperation, pleading for a break and dreading the possibility that every single day might be this chaotic. He lay awake, his mind racing. If he were to make a move on Leviena, he wondered how Ulza would react. Would it be with curiosity, or perhaps repulsion and fear? At worst, if he simply gave in to temptation, his thoughts spiraled. He had no idea what kind of reaction to expect from her. He reminded himself that he had bought her to boost his combat power, not because he had any interest in hugging a little girl. The question suddenly struck him as he looked at the waking girl. He asked her how old she was, wondering if perhaps she didn't look her age. His gaze drifted down her small frame. His sleep-deprived mind began to short-circuit. A frantic thought surfaced. Maybe he should just let the momentum take over. Maybe she was at an age where it was acceptable. He immediately recoiled from the idea. As his internal conflict raged, Olza, now fully awake, turned to him with a bright smile and wished him a good morning. He looked at her sleeping form once more, a wave of certainty washing over him. She was just a kid. There was no way she could possibly be of age. His brief moment of clarity was shattered when Leviana appeared at his bedside, gently waking him. She greeted him with a good morning and asked if he had slept well. In response, he could only scream internally, shaking his head in exhausted frustration. Obviously not. Later, at the breakfast table, Olza ate with gusto while Leviana, now fully dressed for her duties, informed Xenon that she would begin the morning preparations and asked him to wait a moment. Now dressed in his academy uniform, Xenon called to Olza, announcing they were heading out. He reminded her to remember what he had told her the previous night as they prepared to leave for the academy. She enthusiastically promised not to make a fuss, scream, or throw a tantrum. Xenon nodded, satisfied. He reflected that the decision to bring Olza to school had been made from the start, as it was common for the many nobles and royalty at the academy to bring their maids and attendants with them. He explains that from now on, the school curriculum will include dungeon exploration and monster hunting outside the city. Because of this new requirement, he must bring Olza along, as she will be accompanying him into the dungeons. As they walk towards a waiting carriage, he issues a stern warning to Olza. If she causes any trouble at the academy, she will be banned from the school grounds. Her eyes sparkle with excitement as she readily agrees, promising to be on her best behavior so she can remain with her master. With the terms set, they depart. Leviana waves them off, wishing them a safe trip and musing that Olza is unlikely to cause trouble since she declared her good intentions herself. Inside the carriage, Olza peers out the window, her expression one of pure wonder at the passing scenery. The young Oni hums a cheerful, contented tune. Across from her, Xenon sits with his arms crossed, his face a mask of stoicism that barely conceals his underlying apprehension. His silence does not deter her. Olza's humming evolves into a small, happy song, its lyrics simple. Lala going to school with master. Her song continues, now describing the so many hazes they pass. Xenon watches her, internally questioning the reason for her sudden strange song and overwhelming happiness. He breaks his silence to ask if she is having fun. Olza turns to him, beaming, and confirms enthusiastically. As their carriage rolls on, a wave of doubt washes over Xenon, making him wonder if bringing her was truly the right choice. Her cheerful tune suddenly takes a sinister turn. With her golden eyes gleaming and a fanged grin spreading across her face, she sings, "Fun Fuyuan killing and murdering." The chilling words strike him with full force. His eyes widen in utter shock and horror. As the carriage approaches the Grand Academy, the feeling of impending doom he'd felt after a long night returns with a vengeance. He is now filled with a profound and unshakable sense of unease about what is to come. A lavish carriage pulls up to the steps of a grand, ornate building. Xenon Baskerville, now in a dark academy uniform, steps out and helps the small, horned girl, Olza, down from the carriage. Other students nearby stop and stare, their faces a mixture of surprise and curiosity. The sight immediately draws the attention of a group of students who recognize the opulent vehicle. One of them identifies it aloud, confirming that it is the carriage of the notorious Baskerville family. Their presence sends ripples of conversation through the courtyard. Students murmur about the cute child with Xenon, quickly noticing her horns and the collar around her neck, identifying her as a demi-human slave. Xenon, walking through the crowd, grimaces internally. He had mentally prepared for an uproar, but realizes he still underestimated just how much they would stick out like a sore thumb. Olza, however, remains blissfully unaware of the tension. With a bright smile and a raised arm, she cheerfully announces that she will lead the way, overjoyed to have accompanied her master to the academy. Her enthusiasm prompts a weary sigh from Xenon. He questions if she even knows the way to the classroom and instructs her to just be good and stay behind him. With that, he begins to walk, leading the way through the courtyard as Olza follows closely. They part the sea of staring students. The crowd continues to watch them, their gazes filled with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. One student remarks on how uneasy he feels looking at Olza's innocent face, which shines with pure, unadulterated joy. This unease stems from her origins. Olza hails from the demi-human continent, a land uninhabited by humans. She is a member of a combat-oriented race and was raised as such, raising the question of whether she can truly adapt to the social life of the academy. A vision of her fierce, powerful-looking kin underscores this concern. Despite these concerns, Olza's focus is solely on her master. She tugs on his sleeve, her expression full of worry as she asks if he's all right, even wondering if his stomach hurts. Xenon, meanwhile, lets out a quiet sigh of relief, thinking to himself that everything should be fine as long as she simply acts as his attendant. He reassures himself that he told her this many times and that she won't cause any trouble. He pats her head gently, turning to her and stating aloud that he is fine, merely lost in thought as they continue towards the academy building. He looked down at the small girl beside him, his voice low and firm. He instructed her to listen to whatever he said and, most importantly, not to do anything that might cause him trouble. As they stood before the Grand Academy, he realized an important thought had slipped his mind. Trouble isn't always something one brings upon themselves. Sometimes, it seeks you out. Just then, a sharp voice called out his name. "Hey, Baskerville." Xenon's expression hardened with annoyance as he turned to face the source. Trouble had indeed arrived. The accuser was Leon Brave, the game's hero. He pointed a finger, his voice filled with righteous fury, demanding to know who the girl was and how Xenon could put a slave collar on a child. Xenon recognized this passionate nature. Leon was the type to risk his life for a stranger, not one to ignore such a sight. He had clearly misjudged the situation. Leon continued his tirade, admitting that after Xenon had saved their classmates in the dungeon, he thought Xenon might not be a bad person. But seeing this, he declared, proved that Xenon was nothing but a scoundrel. The confrontation drew the eyes of other students in the courtyard. Xenon clicked his tongue, annoyed by the spectacle and inwardly cursing Leon as an oblivious troublemaker. His entire plan had been to avoid interfering with Leon in the main plot. As long as he didn't get involved with the heroines, Leon was supposed to follow the game's script, defeat the Demon King, and save the world. Now, faced with this unexpected turn, he was left to wonder how he would deal with it. Of all people, why was Leon, the hero, getting involved with him? Leon's voice broke through his thoughts, shouting for him to set the girl free. Clutching his head in frustration, Xenon muttered back, asking what the problem was. He wanted to curse the heavens. Reality was proving to be far more unpredictable than any game. Facing the crowd, Xenon calmly stated his case. He explained that academy regulations permit bringing attendance and that he had purchased the girl legally, following all proper procedures. Therefore, he concluded, looking directly at Leon, he was following the rules, and Leon had no right to complain. The hero was left seething as the other students, including the main heroines, watched the tense standoff. He watches as another of the hero's companions, HEROINE'S, steps forward with a determined expression. He internally reflects on her righteous nature, particularly her sensitivity towards the plight of women and children. Turning his attention back to Leon, he poses a direct question. If his actions are so unforgivable, does Leon intend to take the girl away by force? The question leaves Leon momentarily stunned. He is well aware of the kingdom's laws. Slaves are legally recognized as property. To forcibly free one from their master would be considered theft or even robbery, a serious crime. Xenon observes him, internally sighing. He recognizes this pattern of behavior in Leon, always sticking his nose into unnecessary trouble, wasting time, money, and effort on roundabout solutions. After a moment of consideration, Leon changes his tactic, asking what price he must pay for Xenon to sell the girl and release her from slavery. He internally likens the situation to a role-playing game. Leon is acting just like a protagonist who is righteous to a fault, and such games are often about enjoying those very same unnecessary detours. His mind made up, Xenon places a hand on Ulza's head and declares that he will not sell her, no matter the offer. He refers to her as his precious slave, subordinate, and attendant, then dismissively tells Leon to get lost, adding that he will see him later in the classroom. Enraged by the callous dismissal, Leon lunges forward, grabbing Xenon by the collar. He shouts in frustration, demanding to know why Xenon still doesn't understand after everything that has been said. He raises his fist, ready to strike. Xenon, seeing the incoming blow, resigns himself to taking the hit, realizing that using violence against a supposedly defenseless person in front of so many witnesses would cast him as the villain. But before the punch can land, Ulza cries out, vowing that she will not allow anyone to lay a hand on her master. She leaps high into the air, positioning herself directly between Leon and Xenon. In her hands, she brandishes a large, heavy, spiked club, ready to defend her master. With a powerful cry, she brings the massive club down. It smashes into the stone ground directly in front of Leon, who stumbles back in shock. The force of the impact shatters the pavement, sending fragments flying. Her face is a mask of fury as she holds her weapon ready. She declares that no one will escape, vowing to slaughter anyone who stands as an enemy to her master. She ignored his pleas, swinging her massive spiked club with terrifying force. Leon, caught completely off guard, could only cry out as he tried to explain his intentions to save her. The girl, however, was lost to reason, roaring a single, brutal word as her weapon descended. The impact sent Leon reeling backwards, his arm taking the brunt of the blow. As he flew through the air, his companions pleaded with the girl, insisting that Leon was not her enemy and only wanted to free her from slavery. Their words did not reach her. Her gaze remained fixed and unyielding. In her mind, there was no room for discussion. Her cold determination sent a wave of panic through the onlookers. Students scrambled away in terror, and even Xenon, observing the chaos, found the scene frightening. HEROINE'S tried to call for order, shouting for everyone to stop. He snapped out of his daze, realizing with a jolt of panic that this was no time to be a spectator. It was the master's duty, he thought, to stop his own attendant. He rushed forward as Ulza, lost in a bloodthirsty trance, chanted about slaughtering her master's enemies. Zenon desperately commanded her to stop, shouting for her to wait and sit. His commands had no effect. He realized with dawning horror that when she entered battle mode, she became a true berserker, completely losing track of her surroundings. Annoyed at his own fleeting sense of awe, he roared for her to listen to her master. The escalating violence terrified the remaining students. One cried out for a teacher to be summoned, while another urged the others to flee before they were caught in the crossfire. Amidst the chaos, Zenon's resolve hardened. He knew he couldn't allow the story's protagonist to die here. If it had come to this, he would have to stop Ulza himself, even if he was injured in the process. He braced himself for the worst. He threw himself in the path of her next attack, positioning his body between the berserker and Leon. Unrecognized by the frenzied girl, he took the full force of her club to his chest, the blow crushing the air from his lungs. He absorbed the full, brutal force of the attack. Leon could only watch, his face a mask of pure terror as the blow meant for him landed squarely on Zenon. The shock sent him collapsing to his knees, reduced to a sobbing, drooling mess. His sword slipped from his nerveless fingers, clattering against the stone floor. Meanwhile, Zenon's body was seized by violent convulsions as electricity arced across his frame. The other students cried out, aghast at the brutal spectacle. Through his daze, Zenon saw Aerith standing over the fallen Leon, raising her mace for what she declared a finishing blow. He desperately shouted for her to wait. Nearby, Ulza, now out of her rage, innocently asked her master if it was time for them to make children, prompting Zenon to frantically order her to stay put. He grabbed Ulza by her horns, scolding the crazy, out-of-control girl for her delusional thoughts and for causing such an embarrassing scene in public. Deciding the situation was untenable, he announced they were leaving. Around them, the crowd's murmurs turned to panicked shouts as they took full notice of Leon's condition. Faced with the commotion and the sight of his rival lying motionless, Zenon could only bow his head and offer a profuse, repeated apology. The crowd gathered around the still form of Leon Praise, the hero's descendant. A grim thought hung in the air. Had the protagonist truly met his end? In the aftermath of the confrontation, two guards carry an unconscious Leon Praise away on a stretcher. Nearby, students discuss the incident. One remarks that Leon suddenly resorted to violence, while Nagisa Saikai corrects him, stating that the young girl, Ulza, protected Baskerville and counterattacked. Another student adds that the girl ended up being the stronger one. As they depart, Erythentria stands by the academy gates, calling out Zenon's name with concern. Meanwhile, a crowd of students has gathered, gossiping about the event. The consensus among them is that Leon was likely at fault, having suddenly demanded that Zenon sell his slave to him. Inside a sunlit hallway, Zenon sternly reprimands Ulza. He warns her that if she goes berserk like that again, he will never bring her to the academy. Wincing from an injury, he reminds her to keep her promise. Ulza meekly agrees. Internally, Zenon reflects that while the academy won't pursue the matter between the noble houses, they noted his use of excessive force. He resolves to make sure Ulza watches her behavior as well. Following the tense exchange, he and Ulza enter a large, tiered lecture hall already filled with their fellow students, finding their seats amidst the quiet stares and whispers. Just as they settle, a cheerful student approaches Zenon. He introduces himself as John, reminding Zenon that he was saved by him during the gargoyle incident. Zenon, however, stares back blankly, having no recollection of the boy. He continues to follow them down the hall, attempting to make conversation. Zenon internally laments his reputation. Leon is popular, but Zenon's villain face ensures he gets all the hate. He also admits to himself that walking around with a cute girl in a slave collar feels criminal. Around them, students whisper, spreading rumors that Zenon went on a rampage and that Leon was hurt trying to stop him. John presses on, observing that Leon must have picked the fight. He then comments that Zenon's features are actually quite decent, making it a mystery why he looks so scary. Annoyed, Zenon tells him to leave him alone, stating there's nothing he can do about his face. John cheerfully retorts that he has that face too. Suddenly, a female student named Elisa rushes forward and sweeps Ulza into a tight hug, exclaiming how cute she is. Zenon demands she let go. Elisa and another girl begin fawning over Ulza, wondering if they could keep a demi-human as a pet. John quickly intervenes, asking them to be gentle, explaining that Ulza is from the demon continent and isn't used to people. Her friend's words cause Elisa to freeze in embarrassment. John explains to a confused Zenon that Elisa simply loves small animals and didn't mean to treat Ulza like a pet. Zenon seems to accept this, relieved that her intentions were merely friendly. Despite the explanation, he remains internally frustrated. He knows he isn't entirely blameless as her guardian, but it's irritating that Ulza seems to hold a grudge against him when it was Leon who started the fight that caused a rampage. As he broods, John pats his shoulder, misinterpreting his mood and remarking that a woman's grudge is a terrifying thing. As classes began at the academy, the Oni girl, Ulza, found herself swarmed by affectionate classmates. One girl, Elisa, clung to her arm, fawning over her. Olza, slightly flustered, insisted that class was starting and that it was time to let go. The incident with Leon Praise had lasting repercussions. He was absent the next day and the days that followed. Xenon privately wondered if the kick had done more than just physical damage, which should have been healed by magic. Perhaps the mental shock had been too much for him. In the cafeteria, Xenon reflected that thanks to the absence of the annoying protagonist, he had been able to enjoy a peaceful school life. His companion, John, noted that it had already been a week, questioning if that wasn't too long of an absence. Xenon mused internally that for a guy, recovering from such an injury would naturally take some time. As he ate, his gaze drifted across the room and met the eyes of Shell Uranus. As always, she was glaring at him with open hostility, though she made no move to approach or speak to him. His attention then shifted to Ulza's table, where she was being doted on by Aerith and Nagisa. Both girls were eagerly offering the young Oni their desserts. She eagerly accepted, her face lighting up as she declared the meat delicious. The other students watched, captivated by her cuteness. Xenon observed that because of Ulza, his classmates had started talking to him more, her charm seemingly reducing the negative effect of his resting villain face. Her enthusiastic eating only fueled the students' adoration. They commented that it was like feeding a pet, and that she looked like a hamster with her cheeks stuffed. As they offered her even more food, a blushing Ulza requested they not treat her like a child, which only made them find her more endearing. The peaceful days at the Grand Academy continued, marked by this new, unexpected social dynamic. Back at the table, the conversation inevitably returned to the school's most notable absentee. John wondered aloud why Leon hadn't shown up yet. Another student remarked that it was no wonder, speculating that getting kicked in the crotch by a child might have left him unable to have children. John recoiled in shock, admitting he would be traumatized too. Hearing another student call Leon an idiot for trying to take away someone else's slave, Xenon sipped his drink. He internally conceded that he had harbored the exact same doubt about the hero's judgment. He continued to reflect on Leon Praise, concluding that the hero is definitely the type whose sense of justice tends to run rampant. He recalled that Leon, as a hot-blooded protagonist, frequently acted on impulse without considering the consequences. His thoughts drifted to the current situation. He didn't think the real Leon was any different from the one in the game. Trying to save an enslaved child was exactly the kind of thing the good-natured hero would do. While following one's convictions might seem charming in a story, he mused that in reality, dealing with such a person is just incredibly troublesome. The only difference now is that this isn't a game. This reality, he mused while picturing Shell Uranus, isn't as simple as a story where everything can be split into good and evil. There are plenty of gray areas, and having those areas painted over in black by hero's subjective whims is nothing but an absolute nuisance. He came to a cynical conclusion, a slight smirk on his face. Leon is simply too earnest and clumsy. Sometimes it's better to just turn a blind eye and let things slide. That, he decided, is just part of being a functioning member of society. Elsewhere in the dining hall, the mood was lighter. Elisa cheerfully offered some of her food to Ulza. Nearby, John commented to his companion that while he thinks Leon is an idiot, he doesn't believe he's a bad person. At his own table, surrounded by a mountain of empty plates from Ulza's feast, Xenon sipped his drink. He felt the same way as the other student. He hoped for a day when he and Leon could finally understand each other, if only to ensure the defeat of the Demon King. Beside him, a very full Ulza sighed in satisfaction. Having finished their meal, he and Ulza began walking down a sunlit academy hallway, the Oni girl trotting happily ahead of him. His quiet walk was interrupted as he glanced out a window. His eyes narrowed, catching sight of a familiar group gathered in the courtyard below. Leon and his companions were animatedly speaking to someone. Down below, Leon Praise was making his case with fervor. "Hey, come on, just join my party," he pleaded. He promised she wouldn't regret it, suggesting a trial run for a quest where he and John would be the front line, and she would be the healer. The girl they were speaking to hesitated, murmuring that joining a party with only guys was a bit concerning. The target of this intense recruitment was none other than Aerith Centria, the Saint of Centria and an excellent cleric. Xenon watched from the window, recognizing her immediately and wondering about their pushy tactics. Beside him, a curious Ulza began repeatedly bonking her head against the window pane to get a better look. He recognized the scene instantly. As Aerith stood flustered before a group of students, he realized this was the pivotal game event, the moment she was meant to join Leon's party. A jolt of recognition shot through him as he thought, "Wait." A young man with light hair stepped forward, his expression firm as he faced the other students. He declared that Centria had already decided to join his party. Turning to her, he said, "Let's go, Centria-san." Taking her hand, he began to lead her away. Aerith looked up at him, a blush spreading across her cheeks. Impressed by his courage, a faint affection began to bloom within her, the first step on her journey to becoming a promising heroine. From a nearby window, Xenon watched the scene conclude. A faint smile touched his lips as he mused that it was quite moving to see a game event play out before his very eyes. He felt a sense of satisfaction, thinking, there it is, that event, his satisfaction shattered in an instant. His eyes flew wide with dawning horror as a terrible realization struck him, and a choked gasp escaped his lips. He stumbled back from the window, hands flying to his head as he groaned in agony. Behind him, Olza was startled by his sudden stop. "Master," she asked, "can you please not stop so suddenly?" The reason for his panic was a sudden, horrifying memory. He remembered with chilling certainty, Leon, that bastard, was supposed to be absent today. In the unfolding scene, Aerith's expression shifted to one of confusion and worry. The consequences of this revelation rippled through the group. With the hero absent, the other students turned their worried gazes towards Xenon. They questioned what would happen to the event and whether Aerith would be all right, wondering what Xenon himself would do now. Outside the academy building, the hero Leon Praise and the cleric Aerith Centria are stopped by two other male students. One of the students, John, presses Aerith to join his group, reminding her that his father, a count, is on good terms with her father, Viscount Centria. He asks her to try getting along with them, just once. From a nearby window, Xenon Baskerville watches the interaction unfold. Aerith reluctantly agrees, stating that she will join them, but only for this one time. Pleased, John confirms their plan to head to a dungeon after school. As he speaks, Aerith clenches her fist, her expression hardening with resolve. From his vantage point, Xenon reacts with disbelief. He watches as John's group leads Aerith away, realizing with a jolt that the game's heroine has just been taken by a minor character. He internally questions what Leon should do, recognizing that John's group is clearly targeting Aerith for some ulterior motive. He spirals, realizing the dire consequences. If Aerith doesn't become Leon's party member, the hero is destined for ruin. The entire situation is a disaster, made all the more frustrating because it was caused not by a major villain, but by insignificant small fry. His distress manifests physically as he clutches his head in a deserted hallway. Unseen by him, the Oni girl, Olza Weidiger, stands further down the corridor, silently watching his turmoil. Meanwhile, life at the academy continues. In a lecture hall, students discuss their plans for an upcoming free period. One enthusiastically asks a friend to go to the Sage's playground, while another announces he is heading to the training grounds to practice. Xenon, however, remains fixated on the scene outside, his eyes narrowed in stress as he watches John and his friends continue their conversation with Aerith. Elsewhere, Leon's party, including Nagisa and Shell, discusses their own plans. They decide to head to the Cave King's bedchamber, a beginner-friendly dungeon near the city inhabited by rock monsters. They are confident it will be an easy clear with a top-tier healer. Xenon, aware of their intentions and the flaw in their plan, thinks to himself that this is not good. Finally snapping from the frustration, Xenon declares that there is no point in worrying. He decides that staying put is making him miserable, so he will head off to a dungeon himself. He believes a bit of hunting should cheer him up. As he walks, his companion, Olza, looks up at him with wide, curious eyes, asking where they are heading now. He dismisses the idea of a long journey, declaring it a hassle and suggesting they just head to the Sage's training grounds. Olza, however, questions his decision, asking why he isn't pursuing the girl from earlier. Xenon feigns ignorance, retorting with the question of why on earth he would do such a thing. She presses the point, observing that the look on his face clearly showed he was worried about her and wanted to follow. Caught off guard, Xenon stammers, admitting that she might have a point before trailing off, unable to form a complete denial. Seeing his hesitation, Olza urges him to hurry if he intends to go after the girl, otherwise they won't be able to catch up. Xenon is momentarily surprised that Olza pays such close attention to others. He firmly denies that he ever said he was going after her, adding that it's not like anything is certain to happen anyway. His thoughts drift back to the other students. He internally concedes that while their method of recruiting Aerith was pushy, they didn't break any rules. He reasons that the difficulty of the Cave King's bedchamber isn't high, so unless they have incredibly bad luck, they won't need his help. Besides, he reminds himself, this is no place for the villain, Xenon, to step in. According to the game's narrative, the one who saves the main heroine is supposed to be the hero, Leon. He cannot be the one to save Aerith. Doing so would trigger a story flag that would cast him as some kind of heroine-stealing protagonist, a role he refuses to play. The responsibility, as it should be, falls to Leon. Despite his internal rationalizations, his conflict is plain on his face. Olza, noticing his pained expression, asks him why he looks so troubled. He internally admits that his heart is wavering. He wants to save Aerith, but feels he cannot make that choice. The conflict stems from a deep-seated trauma from his past life, playing Dambaré 2. In that game's story, the villain Xenon manipulated Aerith, which drove Leon, who admired her, to resurrect the Demon King out of sheer hatred. The memory is so potent that he wishes he could just pretend he hadn't seen anything. He laments that he's too much of a pushover to have any right to laugh at Leon. Watching him, Olza concludes that while she doesn't understand his worries, she knows an old Oni proverb. If an Oni is troubled, they should just bite into it first. With a grin, she opens her mouth wide, revealing rows of sharp teeth. She explains her philosophy with brutal simplicity. Rather than worrying, one should just sink their teeth into their enemies first and deal with the details later. If he can't stop worrying, he should just find someone he hates and punch them. Xenon is struck by the sheer, muscle-brained directness of her logic. Tears of relief and amusement stream down his face as he realizes how refreshing her incredibly dumb idea is. His choked amusement erupts into full-throated laughter. He sees it now. Her battle-crazed race is far too stupid for complex thought, and it makes all his own worrying seem utterly pointless. Composing himself, he gently pats Olza's head. He admits she's right. It wouldn't hurt to be an idiot for once, especially since Leon is cooped up in bed. He resolves to follow her example and act on his feelings. Olza's face lights up, and she agrees with a happy, "Yes, master." He continues to rationalize his decision. Even if interfering has a negative impact on the scenario, it's Leon who will have to pay the price. After all, Leon getting injured and missing school was his own fault. Therefore, it's ridiculous for Xenon to be racking his brains over this. With newfound conviction, he declares that no matter how things turn out, he will always play the role of the villain. He'll say who he wants and crush anyone he dislikes. He will simply do as he pleases. As they run forward together, he shouts that simple is best. He yells, "Let's go," and Olza gives a confident thumbs up, proudly acknowledging him as her master. Without a moment's hesitation, they leap from the edge of the academy rooftop, launching themselves toward their objective. Their destination is a dark, arched tunnel set into a stone embankment. From the oppressive darkness within, a multitude of glowing, predatory eyes stare out, waiting. Standing before a large, reinforced door, Xenon identifies their location, the Cave King's bedchamber. Inside, a hulking stone golem stands ready. With a shared look of determination, he and Olza prepare to enter. The moment they are inside, Olza unleashes her fury. Wielding a massive, spiked club, she roars, "Get crushed!" and brings it down upon the smaller, rock-like creatures that swarm the floor, shattering them instantly. She becomes a whirlwind of slaughter, smashing the rock-type monsters to smithereens. From a safe distance, the student John watches in absolute terror. Xenon observes the brutal display, noting to himself how effective blunt weapons are against these particular enemies. He praises Olza for her excellent work, patting her on the head. She beams with pride, exclaiming that she did it for her master. Internally, Xenon marvels at her strength, thinking it's just what he'd expect from someone who could beat Leon to a pulp. He then warns her that this is a 10-floor dungeon, and the monsters will grow stronger the deeper they go. Olza confidently confirms she understands. As they continue their descent down the winding stone steps, he notes that they still haven't caught up to Aerith and the others. This leads him to a grudging conclusion. Leon's party must be fairly competent to have progressed so far into the dungeon on their own. Their progress is abruptly halted by a guttural roar. A hulking stone bear, its body a mass of rock and fur, rears up before them. Olza gasps, a spark of excitement in her eyes as she senses its power, while Xenon identifies the formidable new foe. Before Xenon can even make a move, Olza lunges forward with astonishing speed. With a ferocious cry for it to spill its guts, she delivers a powerful kick to the stone bear's head. Xenon is left standing with his sword raised and magic prepared, his intended target already under assault, a look of mild shock on his face. With a tremendous cry, Olza brings her attack down, seemingly crushing the stone bear in a single blow. The beast lies twitching on the ground as Xenon looks on, startled by her raw power. "Hey," he mutters in disbelief. As Olza strikes a cheerful pose, Xenon stands apart, a hint of disappointment on his face. He reflects that he hasn't had a real fight since the gargoyle, and this one ended before he even got a chance to warm up. His expression hardens as he turns to her. He issues a firm command. "Olza, in the next fight, stay back until I give you the word." The Oni girl is visibly shocked, her eyes wide with disbelief, as she protests that she can't let her master put himself in danger. Xenon attempts to placate her, asking if she doesn't trust him. He insists that he isn't so weak that he needs her constant protection. Unseen by them, the defeated stone bear begins to stir and push itself up from the ground. The stone bear rises to its feet, prompting a smirk from Xenon. "Right on time," he says with satisfaction. Just then, a second stone bear emerges from the trees with a ferocious roar, joining its companion. Now facing two of the monstrous beasts, Xenon's confidence only grows. A wide grin spreads across his face as he readies his sword, recalling his knowledge from the game. "I still remember your attack pattern," he thinks to himself. His gaze locks onto one of the bears. He watches its muscles tense and its body lower slightly, recognizing the telltale signs. This is the motion for its charging attack. As predicted, the beast hurtles forward, its massive, fanged jaws snapping shut where Xenon stood just a moment before. With calm precision, he sidesteps the reckless charge. With the creature's back now exposed, Xenon pivots and brings his sword down in a powerful overhead slash. The blade shatters the crystalline armor on the bear's spine, sending shards flying as the second beast looks on. Without pausing, Xenon lets out a fierce battle cry, twisting his body to swing his sword for another powerful strike. His final strike shatters the ground beneath the stone bear, decisively ending the battle he had claimed for himself. As the dust settles, Olza looks on with wide-eyed admiration, declaring that he is truly worthy of being her master. Xenon, still poised for battle, simply states that there was no need for her to worry. He internally reflects on his performance, acknowledging that while his skill proficiencies are low, his knowledge of the game's mechanics allows him to face higher-level foes. He muses that defeating stronger opponents will rapidly increase his power. Though her praise sounds a bit sarcastic, he finds it doesn't feel too bad. He then tells Ulza they cannot afford overconfidence, as their current strength is not yet enough to guarantee their safety against the dungeon's dangers. With the immediate threats neutralized, they press forward, leaving a cavern floor littered with the bodies of defeated monsters. Their path leads them deeper, to a marker indicating they have reached the 8th floor, the Cave King's bedchamber. Before proceeding, Xenon cautions Ulza that the visibility is poor and she must stay sharp. She agrees enthusiastically, adding with a menacing grin that she will slaughter any foe she finds. Suddenly, a small, goblin-like creature holding a bomb leaps from the darkness, cackling that it has found them. The unexpected appearance and the threat of an explosion cause Ulza to let out a piercing scream. The creature emerged from a dark, narrow passage, its entrance ominously littered with bones. At that same moment, a trio of panicked students bursts into view from deeper within the cave, one shouting in terror about a monster's presence. Seeing them running blindly toward the new danger, Xenon yells at them to stop right there. When his command is ignored, he is forced to act. He incants Shadow Bind, and dark tendrils erupt from the ground, ensnaring the students. They cry out in surprise and pain as their reckless flight is brought to an abrupt halt. He holds the students fast with his magic, his expression cold and demanding. One of the students, his face contorted in panic, recognizes him as Baskerville. Ignoring the student's shock, Xenon gets straight to the point, demanding to know why they were running and, more importantly, the whereabouts of Aerith Centria. The student stammers that they had no choice, claiming a powerful monster appeared unexpectedly while they were gathering materials. He insists they didn't mean to abandon their companion. Xenon internally processes the information. They encountered a strong monster and fled, leaving Aerith behind. He clicks his tongue, his disdain palpable. Turning his back on them, he declares their fate is not his problem. The bound students shout in protest, begging him to undo the spell so they can escape. He ignores their pleas entirely, calling for Ulza to move out. She happily agrees, ready to follow her master. As they walk away from the ensnared students, he explains that he has already cleared most of the monsters in the immediate area. He coldly speculates that they might be safe if they're lucky, but if not, another monster will surely find them before the binding magic fades. He breaks into a run, thinking to himself that he couldn't care less about the fates of cowards who abandon their allies. His thoughts are cut short as a brilliant light erupts from cavern ahead, his eyes widening in alarm. From the passage emerges the source of the student's terror, a gigantic golem made of shimmering, crystalline mithril, its form massive and menacing. The mithril golem lunges, but its path is blocked by a hexagonal barrier of light. Behind it stands Aerith Centria. Recognizing the formidable foe from the game, Xenon immediately prepares a counterattack, invoking his Dark Blade skill. He quickly instructs Ulza to buy them time by dodging the golem's attacks without overextending herself. She eagerly accepts, leaping forward and taunting the beast to draw its attention. From within her protective shield, a stunned Aerith recognizes her unlikely savior, Baskerville. Approaching her barrier, Xenon observes that she hasn't changed at all from how he remembers her in the game. Instead of asking for help, her first instinct is to tell him to run away. Aerith pleads with him to flee, insisting that he cannot possibly defeat this monster. He continues his internal monologue, reflecting on her unwavering nature. He knows she believes her very purpose is to sacrifice herself for others. If anyone is in trouble, she will try to save them, even at the cost of her own life. He held Aerith, who was panting from exhaustion. He understood her intent. She was sacrificing herself so the other students could escape. She pleaded with him to run away, to leave her behind. She insisted that if he stayed, both he and the girl fighting the golem would surely die. Annoyed by her continued self-sacrificial pleas, he angrily forced a potion to her lips, commanding her to drink. After a brief cough, she thanked him, still insisting she would buy him time to run. Her persistence only fueled his frustration. He seethed internally, realizing she was starting to genuinely anger him and deciding he would give her a piece of his mind. His frustration exploded into a furious shout. "You idiot," he roared, demanding to know who would listen to such nonsense. Aerith stared back, completely taken aback by his outburst. As Ulza battled the golem behind them, Xenon made a silent vow. He would make Aerith ask to be saved, truly and sincerely. As the gargoyle looms, Aerith pleads with Xenon, begging him not to die for someone like her. She warns that at their current rate, both he and the creature will perish. Xenon reacts with disbelief, shocked by her self-deprecating words. She stammers, unable to continue, but Xenon cuts her off. He shouts that her self-esteem is far too low, accusing her of acting as if her own life has no value at all. The reason for Aerith's profound self-sacrifice lies in her past, with her mother. A memory surfaces. As a child, she and her mother were ambushed by a group of bandits. In that moment of crisis, her mother erected a magical barrier to protect her daughter. However, maintaining such a powerful spell steadily consumed her mana over time. The bandits, seeing her struggle, realized she would eventually perish. Despite the strain, Aerith's mother resolved to hold the barrier, even if it cost her own life. Just as her strength was failing, the arrival of guards sent the bandits fleeing in a panic. With the threat gone, her mother finally collapsed. Aerith survived, but at the cost of her mother's life. This trauma led her to devalue her own existence, becoming someone willing to throw herself away for others. Xenon's thoughts overlay the tragic scene, expressing his deep-seated hatred for such self-sacrifice, for those who discard their lives and the chance for happiness. Back in the present, Xenon confronts her directly. Aerith weakly claims it is her duty as a servant of God, but he demands she stop making light of herself. He declares that since the protagonist isn't there, he will speak in his place, telling her that by denying her own worth, she rejects everyone who cares for her, including the parents who died for her sake. He yells, demanding to know why she can't understand. He turns away, arms crossed, acknowledging internally that those were Leon's lines to say. With the hero absent, he had no choice but to deliver the speech himself. Aerith is left stunned and speechless. Xenon's resolve hardens. He internally vows that he will not allow the heroine to die, saving someone else, nor will he allow her to be unhappy. He will smash every depressing development, becoming a hero or a villain, whatever it takes, to secure her happiness. He grabs Aerith, his face contorted with intensity, and shouts that it's pure arrogance for someone who can't even make themselves happy to think they can make others happy. He tells her not to be so conceited, declaring that her life is hers alone and there is no such thing as a life that is okay to waste for the sake of others. He continues his harsh lecture, insisting that a weakling should act the part by clinging to someone, crying, and begging to be saved. He points towards the ongoing battle with the gargoyle, reminding her that she must have things she wants to do and hobbies she enjoys. He demands that if she doesn't want to die, she must voice it. His words finally break through her composure. Tears stream down Aerith's face as she sobs, wrestling with a deep-seated guilt. She wonders if it is truly acceptable for her, someone who survived at the cost of her own mother's life, to ask someone else for help. Seeing her hesitation, Xenon leans in closer, his voice dropping to an intense whisper. He calls her a moron, declaring that asking for help is the privilege of the weak. Since she is weaker than him, he commands her to hurry, lower her head, and beg him to save her. Her resolve finally crumbles. With tears still glistening in her eyes, Aerith clasps her hands in supplication and formally pleads, "I'm begging you. Please save me." Her earnest plea catches him completely off guard. He internally remarks on how enviably pretty she looks even while crying. Her subsequent shy comment about his own beauty leaves him flustered. A sense of dread washes over him as he realizes he may have just triggered some kind of troublesome romantic development, but he quickly steels himself against it. Shaking off his distraction, he turns his focus back to the fight. He thrusts a mana potion at Aerith, stating she has no right to refuse it. He declares his intention to defeat the large monster and orders her to help. Aerith agrees, but voices her concern about the monster's immense power, which has shrugged off every other attack. Xenon scoffs, refusing to be lumped in with those who would abandon a woman, and confidently states that he has a plan. As he speaks, Ulza the Oni struggles in her assault. Her massive club connects with the gargoyle's hide with a deafening clang, but fails to leave so much as a scratch. Xenon watches, noting that even the Oni's powerful strike is ineffective. He grimaces, internally remarking on the creature's incredible toughness, a trait perfectly consistent with his knowledge from a game. He identifies the monster as a gigant mithril, a creature far beyond what one should normally encounter in this area. The world of Damburay operates on a principle of inherent risk. There is a belief that no dungeon, no matter how familiar, is ever completely safe. Unforeseen circumstances are a built-in feature of the world, allowing for the rare 0.1% probability of a dangerous encounter monster appearing, a creature possessing power far beyond the dungeon's designated level. He immediately took command, informing a panicked Aerith that magic was useless against their foe. He ordered her to heal Ulza, the injured demi-human, while he began his own incantation. He knew these nightmare-level enemies possessed skills that could mean instant death for the entire party. With a confident smirk, he confirmed his suspicions. A quick slice to his finger drew a drop of blood, which he touched to the creature's hide, verifying its composition. He knew all too well that the monster's body was covered in mithril ore. He snapped at Aerith, questioning who she thought she was talking to. He commanded her to stop questioning him and simply follow his lead, reminding her that mithril's strong resistance to magic made her attacks completely ineffective. Though taken aback, Aerith complied. Kneeling, she channeled her power, unleashing a torrent of support spells. X-Heal, Strength Up, Guard Up, Stamina Charge, and even Rabbit's Foot for luck. The magic found its target instantly. Ulza felt a sudden surge of power course through her veins as her wounds knitted shut. Re-energized, she declared that she could still fight. Seeing this, Xenon turned back to Aerith. He admonished her for trying to act as a shield when her true strength lay in healing and support, asking what good it did to negate her own abilities. She looked away, still conflicted. Despite his logic, she murmured her simple, heartfelt desire. She just didn't want to see anyone get hurt. He explained the fundamental roles of combat. The vanguard stands at the front to protect the rear. If someone gets hurt, the healer's job is simply to heal them. It was a clear and simple division of labor. With that settled, his focus returned to the beast. He watched as both physical and magical attacks continued to have no effect, internally remarking on the insane design of this death-on encounter monster. Stepping onto a glowing magic circle, Xenon began his true plan. He mused on the world's mechanics. Damburay used a skill proficiency system, not levels. To use a spell, one had to acquire a tome and then grind its use. The spell he was about to cast was one he shouldn't be able to use, a source of past frustration. But now, things were different. He recalled the game's peculiar skill system. Even if a player had a magic tome for a powerful spell, it wouldn't activate if their proficiency was too low. Conversely, this meant that as long as one possessed the tome, the potential to learn was always there, regardless of current skill level. It was this very troublesome system that had captivated him so deeply. With a sharp, confident grin, he declared that there are two ways to defeat the gigant Mithril, and asked if they should begin. He explained the first method, brute force. This involved continuously dodging the creature's attacks, while chipping away at its health with physical strikes, until its immense durability was completely depleted. The second method, he continued, was magic. The common belief that Mithril nullifies magic was false. If the golem sustained magical damage beyond a certain threshold, its Mithril armor would shatter, rendering it a far weaker, ordinary golem. This vital, hard-won information was only known thanks to the many players who shared their findings on walkthrough sites. With this knowledge in mind, he produced a small vial, a pay-to-win item known as a doping bottle, and crushed it in his fist. The doping bottle's effect was immediate, temporarily increasing his skill proficiencies. As the magic circle beneath him flared with power, Aerith and Shell could only watch in stunned silence. His power surged, pushing his skill level to its absolute maximum. A swirling vortex of pure dark energy began to coalesce in his outstretched hand. Empowered, he announced that he could now command the highest tier of dark magic. He yelled for Ulza and Aerith to get back as a massive well of darkness erupted from ground. Leaping above the expanding portal, he invoked the spell's name, Abyss Gate. He knew that the only ones capable of using this spell were the Demon King, and himself, Xenon. The gate fully materialized before the gigant Mithril. The creature let out a guttural roar as shadowy tendrils shot out from the vortex, beginning to ensnare its massive body. Engulfed by the dark magic, the gigant Mithril's crystalline body begins to crack and shatter. Its formidable armor gives way, breaking apart piece by piece under the immense pressure. The creature is utterly obliterated in a final, violent burst of energy, its form disintegrating into nothingness. As the dark power dissipates, a single, gleaming, coin-like item falls from where the monster once stood. With the threat vanquished, Xenon sighs in relief, muttering that it's finally taken care of. From a distance, Ulza cheers exuberantly, shouting that they won, just as she expected from her master. She then launches herself at him, clinging tightly. He winces, telling her not to cling to him as his whole body hurts from the rebound effects of the doping potion. Nearby, Aerith watches the scene, a blush on her face, while Ulza giggles happily. Her gaze fixed on Xenon, Aerith has a profound realization. She thinks to herself that she may have finally met him, the person her mother spoke of, the fated individual to whom she should devote her entire being. While she's lost in thought, Ulza continues to cling to Xenon, excitedly shouting about how cool he was, causing him to cry out in pain. His attention, however, is momentarily diverted. He turns his head slightly, asking if someone had just said something, having perhaps caught a whisper. Startled, Aerith quickly stammers a denial. It would be a little while longer before Xenon realized that missing her words at this moment was a fatal mistake. Within the now silent cavern, the remnants of the defeated golem lie scattered across the crystalline floor. Among the debris, a single, ornate staff rests, abandoned. Xenon recalls the mechanics of this encounter from his past life. He knows that by collecting special medals, proof of clearing a dangerous encounter, he can exchange them with a figure known as the Witch of the Watery Depths for a special item, just like in a game. With the proof of victory secured, he decides it is time to depart. He turns to his companions, Aerith and Ulza, and tells them it's time to head back. However, as they emerge from the cave, they're met by a swirling vortex of wind. Caught within it are the two students who abandoned them, crying out in panic. One of them screams Xenon's surname, Baskerville. The trapped students beg Xenon to release them from the painful spell. He watches them coolly, noting that no monsters came to take the bait. Aerith, however, is aghast, questioning if he intends to save them, and remarking that there's no value in it. Xenon is momentarily stunned, not by her question, but because she addressed him by his first name. Aerith quickly explains that she volunteered to be the decoy, so it makes no sense to blame the others for leaving. She presses her point, arguing that from a student's ethical standpoint, there is no excuse for vigilante justice. Punishing them is the Academy's duty. Xenon's expression hardens as he concedes her point, but retorts that the fact remains they abandoned a party member. Aerith pleads with him to stop tarnishing his own reputation. She insists there's no need for someone like him to dirty his hands dealing with such people. Her words strike a chord. Xenon internally agrees with her assessment. If he were to punish his classmates by using them as monster bait, he would be condemned by the entire academy, and the new friends he's made would surely leave him. He lets out a quiet sound of concession. With a decisive snap of his fingers, the spell is broken. The whirlwind vanishes, and the two students plummet to the ground, freed from their magical prison. As the terrified students flee, Xenon turns to Aerith with a wicked grin. He remarks that to show mercy to such hopeless people, she must truly be a saintess. Flustered, Aerith shrieks in protest, vehemently denying the title. He observes as Ulza, now clad in a new dark combat outfit and holding a small bag, fidgets with excitement. Nearby, Aerith stands quietly, her academy uniform now covered by nun's habit. Growing impatient, Ulza declares she is bored and wants to go smash some enemies. In response to the outburst, Aerith looks towards him, her face flushing as she seems to plead a case wordlessly. With a casual wave of his hand, he sighs and concedes, saying, "All right." She then earnestly explains her reasoning. It is not that she wants to save the other students, she clarifies, but that she wants to protect the honor of Xenon, whom she calls her savior. The intensity of her declaration makes her flustered, her hands clasped tightly before her. Her words create a tense silence in the cavern. The two of them stand opposite one another, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Meanwhile, Ulza has already charged ahead, gleefully smashing crystalline monsters. With each shattering blow, items and coins spill onto the cavern floor, which she eagerly gathers into her bag. Her destructive spree catches Xenon's attention. He turns back to Aerith with a smirk, asking cheekily when she became his protector. He then raises his voice, calling out for Ulza to come back. Instantly obedient, Ulza abandons her fight and sprints back towards the group, shouting an enthusiastic, "Yes, master." She arrives, proudly holding up her bag, now bulging with sparkling crystalline shards. "Look, look, master," she exclaims. Ulza collected lots of items. Pleased with her work, Xenon pats her on the head. "Well done, Ulza," he says with a grin. The praise makes the young Oni beam with pure happiness. As a surprised Aerith looks on. With their task complete, he decides it is time to depart. "Let's go back," he announces, leading the way toward the dungeon's exit. He leads the way out of the rocky passage, with Ulza clinging tightly to one of his arms and Aerith, now clad in a nun's habit, walking beside them. As they walk, Aerith suddenly closes the distance, pressing herself against his other side. The unexpected closeness makes him flinch in surprise. The sudden physical contact sends a jolt of shock through him, his face contorting in panicked embarrassment. He internally panics, realizing her chest is pressed against his arm. Flustered, he stammers a request for her to perhaps keep a bit of distance while they walk. She, however, calmly justifies her proximity, explaining that as a healer, she'll be in trouble if she isn't protected, so it's better not to keep too much distance. She then reminds him that he was the one who told her to do as she pleased, leaving him to internally concede the point, though he still feels it's far too close. His mind races. He realizes he's the cause of this. But now a major story flag has been raised with Aerith. He laments that he has snatched away an event that was originally meant for the hero, Leon, since Aerith hasn't even formed a party with him yet. In response to his turmoil, Aerith simply winks, stating that she is taking proper responsibility for his words and doing as she pleases. Noticing his silence, she asks what is wrong. She then recalls her mother's words from just before she passed away, to find a fated partner, devote everything to them, and that person would surely be her hero. Looking at Xenon, she wonders aloud if he is the hero her mother spoke of. Her question leaves him utterly speechless. He reels internally, thinking that Aerith's mother left behind a monumental misunderstanding. He panics, thinking there's no way he's a hero, before catching himself. He's supposed to be the enemy. Before he can articulate any of his frantic thoughts, Aerith continues, suggesting that whether he becomes a hero or a villain is entirely his own choice. She then adds a chilling possibility, that he could become the villain who hunts down the hero and leads the world to ruin. Completely bewildered by this turn, he struggles to respond, accusing her of talking nonsense. He asks when she changed her job to a fortune teller, stating irritably that he doesn't recall asking for life advice. He is still reeling from her words when Aerith leans in closer, her hand gently touching his shoulder. Her proximity and earnest gaze only deepen his bewilderment. She then presses herself firmly against him, her embrace catching him completely off guard. His mind goes blank, overwhelmed by the sudden, intimate contact. As white feathers drift around them, Aerith makes a solemn vow. She declares that if he were to become a hero, she would become a saintess or a guardian angel to protect him. If he chose to live as an ordinary man, she would devote her life to him as an ordinary woman. In sickness and in health, she swears to remain by his side forever, addressing him as her person of destiny. He is utterly stunned by her declaration, his face flushing red. He realizes with a jolt that these lines, this entire heartfelt confession, never appeared in the original game. This is a completely new, unforeseen event. The situation grows even more chaotic as Ulza, seeing Aerith, decides to cling to his other side. Caught between them, Xenon struggles to maintain his composure, desperately telling himself to calm down and not focus on Aerith's chest. He internally laments that this development is far too unexpected for him to handle. Just then, Ulza announces that she is sleepy and innocently asks him to carry her on his back, adding another layer to his predicament. Resigned, he allows the sleeping Ulza onto his back. As they proceed through the cavernous passage, he finds it difficult to walk with the added weight. Aerith walks closely beside him, offering her support and telling him not to worry. Further ahead, Leon and the rest of the group continue onward, seemingly oblivious. Leon, at the front of the group, points towards a brightly lit exit at the top of a long staircase, announcing that they have cleared another dungeon. Behind them, Aerith calls out to Xenon. He looks up towards the light, his expression hardening with resolve as he confirms their success. As he does, Ulza stirs on his back, murmuring that her tummy is hungry. Despite the exhaustion and the absurdity of his situation, a faint, weary smile plays on his lips. Beside him, Aerith lets out a soft giggle, and Ulza continues to sleep peacefully on his back, forming an unlikely trio. He sits in contemplation, internally scorning the game's original scenario. He refuses to become a mere plot device or to follow a predetermined script. With renewed conviction, he vows to forge his own path and prevent the world's collapse on his own terms. This new path will be one of freedom, where he can go anywhere and resolve matters as he sees fit. His thoughts turn to the new bonds he has formed. Ulza is with him, giggling happily, having even made some monster friends of her own. And there is one more person by his side, his newly acquired companion, Aerith Centria, one of the three main heroines from the original story. Her presence marks a significant and deliberate deviation from the world's intended fate. With his decision made, he and Aerith depart through a simple stone archway, leaving the grounds of the Baskerville estate behind them. Their journey leads them toward the grand, ornate gates of a massive institution, their next destination. Having been reincarnated as the villain, his path is now one of his own making. He walks forward with Ulza clinging to his leg and Aerith, cloaked and resolute, by his side. As they step into the sprawling plaza of the academy, it is clear that this new, unwritten story is only just beginning.